introduction and ways in which people can participate, I'd like to note that we have interpretation services being made available by Melissa Lowe. Melissa, if you want to.
大家好，咁我哋而家咧未正式開始之前啦，咁我咧就係 Edward 市議員，咁我哋今日咧係有廣東話翻譯提供俾大家㗎，咁稍後咧大家咧喺你屏幕下底，你會見到一個地球儀嘅按鍵，大家只要點擊入去地球儀嘅按鍵而挑選中文，咁咧就會直接帶到你去呢個廣東話平台，咁大家就會聽到呢個廣東話翻譯㗎啦，多謝 ，Thank you。
Thank you very much. All right, now we'll formally begin. Good afternoon, everyone. I am City Councilor Lydia Edwards, Chair of the Committee on Government Operations. It is Thursday, July 22nd, 2021, and we're here today for a virtual hearing on Docket 0775, Ordinance Amending City of Boston Code, Ordinance Chapter 7, Section 7-2.1 to 7-2.2, Building Energy Reporting and Disclosure, or known as BERDO. This matter is sponsored by Councilor O'Malley, who was referred to the committee on June 16, 2021. In accordance with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, we've modified the open meeting laws and allows for this body to conduct this hearing on Zoom. This enables us to balance responsibilities that we have as councilors with public health. The public may watch this hearing via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council-tv and on Xfinity 8, RCN 82, and Verizon 964. Will also be rebroadcasted at a later date. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. This proposal sets emissions targets and reporting requirements for buildings greater than or equal to 20,000 square feet, establishes the Emissions Review Board to increase accountability and transparency, and establishes an Environmental Justice Buildings Emission Investment Fund. We have many people participating today, and I expect this to be a robust, respectful, great conversation about how we are updating the laws and making sure the city of Boston is becoming more green. Here from the City Council is the lead sponsor, Councilor Matt O'Malley, also Councilor Ed Flynn, and Councilor Andrea Campbell. On behalf of the administration, we have Chief Mariama White-Hammond, Dr. Allison Brizius, Chief Mariama White-Hammond, she's the Chief of Environment, Dr. Allison Brizius, Director of Climate and Environmental Planning, Jessica Boatwright, who's from the Deputy Director of the Office at DND, Eugene Barros, who is the Division Director of Healthy Homes Division of Boston Homes, and Richard McGinnis, who is the Deputy Director of Climate Change and Environmental Planning at the BPDA.
Councilor Edwards, I just want to let you know that Councilor Mejia is in the house too.
Thank you. Well, you've done that, so everyone knows now. We will have several panels as well. There will be an institution panel that includes John Cleveland, Executive Director of the Boston Green Ribbon Commission, Dennis Carlberg, AVP for Sustainability at Boston University, Carol Wedge, CEO of Sheepley Bullfinch. Apologize for my mispronouncing. We've also been joined by Councilor Anissa Sabi-George, Norm Lamond, Sustainability Manager for Turner Construction, and Winston, Vaughn. I apologize, Winston. He's the Massachusetts Director of Climate Solutions, or maybe it's Winston Vaughn, Massachusetts Director of Climate Solutions Healthcare Without Harm. There will be another panel of Darlene Lombos, who is the Executive Secretary Treasurer for Greater Boston Labor Council, Andy Wells-Bean, who is the Campaign Coordinator for BCAN, Dwayne Tyndall, Executive Director of ACE, and Leanne Canty from Mothers Out Front. As I said, this is going to be a robust, good, long conversation about pending ordinance or legislation before this city and before the City Council. I am going to shortly turn it over to my colleagues for some very, very brief opening remarks. I can assure you this will be a hearing followed by a working session at some point in the future to make sure we're clear on this. But I made a commitment to my colleague on his way out that we will rise to the occasion and get this done. So with that, I am turning it now over to my colleague, my friend, Councillor Matt O'Malley, for opening remarks, and then I will go in order of arrival to my other colleagues. Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you for your just remarkable leadership and your much appreciated friendship on this and all matters, environmental and beyond. This is a very good day. This will be a long hearing, but one that I am really excited that we are undertaking. So thank you to you for your quick turnaround and getting it scheduled, and of course to all of our colleagues. I know others will be joining us through the duration. Last month, I stood before members of the Boston City Council and introduced the Buildings Emissions Reduction and Disclosure Ordinance, or rather BERDO 2.0. This plan is the evolution of the almost decade-old Building Energy Reporting and Disclosure Ordinance, commonly known as BERDO, which I worked in concert with former Mayor Tom Menino in passing back in 2013. Purpose of BERDO 1.0 was simply to measure and manage utility usage in buildings over 35,000 square feet. The ordinance was an incredible legislative achievement, making Boston among the first cities in the nation to deploy a green building standard through municipal zoning requirements. Despite some vociferous opposition, it passed, and we saw incredible adoption from building owners in the years that followed. 8 years later, our city and our world look incredibly different because of climate change. Boston is now ranked 6th nationally for urban heat island intensity. We all felt it last month as the hottest June on record in Boston's history. We recognize that climate change is indeed a global challenge. Just a couple of days ago, we witnessed hazy skies across the city that were traveling, sadly, from the bootleg fire in Oregon, in Southwest Oregon. Now, I'm not conflating weather with climate change, but I'm just underscoring the fact that we are feeling it. We're seeing it. As a coastal city, we are particularly vulnerable. Now, this climate crisis can be mitigated with an obvious solution of decreasing our greenhouse gas emissions, and that starts with our buildings. Buildings account for over 70% of Boston's greenhouse gas emissions. Boston must continue to be a national leader in the fight against climate change by making drastic and necessary cuts to our greenhouse gas emissions and begin decarbonization. BERDO 2.0 strengthens our original goals by expanding the ordinance's focus to all of Boston's commercial, residential, institutional buildings that are 20,000 square feet or larger, or 15 or more units. This ordinance may only affect 4% of our entire building stock, about 3,500 buildings. However, that 4% accounts for nearly 60% of all building emissions. If passed, when passed, we will cut 37 million metric tons of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere over the next 30 years. The power in this ordinance is greater than if we were to remove every vehicle from the road of Boston and electrify every bus and every subway times a considerable number. We'll have more of an impact doing this right and doing this correctly. Starting in 2025 and following every 5 years after, we'll be setting aggressive but achievable metrics for buildings to reach a substantial cut in their greenhouse gas emissions. There will be different classifications for emission standards and requirements for each building type, from our hospitals to our universities. We will work with building owners to help them meet their goals. There will be many pathways to achieve emission targets, from electrification to energy efficiency, and there will be additional flexibility, including a hardship compliance plan. We will allow for alternative compliance that will help fund an account charged with environmental justice and renewable energy infrastructure. The update in this new amendment to the ordinance includes a new review board from the mayor and council, and most importantly, members of the community that will help guide us and inform these decisions. I'd like to thank the individuals and groups who've been pushing for this policy update and keeping Boston as a leader on climate change. They include, but are not limited to, the NRDC, who has been such a strong partner, ACE, Alternatives for Community and Environment, BCEC, Mothers Out Front, Boston Climate Action Network, the Sierra Club, the Conservation Law Foundation, and of course, the Green Ribbon Commission. I'd also like to note that this effort began in earnest with partnership with our body, the Boston City Council, and the Mayor's Office. It began with Mayor Marty Walsh and Chief Cook, and is now working with terrific partnership, Mayor Kim Janey and Chief Mariama White Hammond. A special shout out to the indispensable Dr. Allison Breezius, who has been a tremendous partner throughout this duration, as well as Aladine Draroff, who's had remarkable support on the ordinance's legal language and analysis, and Jessica Morris from my team, who has been our quarterback all along. This ordinance is not only community-centered, but also inclusive of the needs of large institutions, such as Boston's remarkable and life-saving hospitals. While Boston is not the first, but the fifth city to approach more aggressive building emission standards and decarbonization, this transformative ordinance will cement us as both a national and international leader in the fight against climate change. When it comes to the existential threat of climate change, we know what we must do: cut our greenhouse gas emissions. This ordinance is how we get there with supportive plans in place. When it comes to climate, there is no time to waste. We must get this done now. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We've also been joined by Councillor Wu. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Councillor O'Malley, for filing this ordinance, and to Councillor Edwards for chairing this important hearing as well. It is critical that we continue to work together to curb our emissions and fight climate change. And this ordinance is designed to set emissions targets for our large buildings so that we can move forward towards carbon neutrality. Climate change is a huge problem, and it's an issue that is especially impacting my district and District 2. Since I represent parts of the Wharf District as well as the South Boston waterfront, areas where it is affected by flooding and climate change. We saw that effect of sea level rise during the storms in January and March of 2018, where the flood shut down sections of the neighborhood and dumpsters were literally floating down the street. I also represent Chinatown, a neighborhood that is impacted by vehicle pollution. It is the area most disproportionately affected in our city and state in terms of air pollution from traffic, according to the Union of Concerned Scientists. It is a neighborhood next to the Mass Pike and 93, and emissions and fumes from traffic have been negatively affecting residents in that area, as air pollution can trigger asthma and other respiratory conditions. So making sure that we protect our environment and lower emissions is an important issue for me. I hope we can work together and come up with a plan that works for everybody. Additionally, sea change, environmental justice, these issues are our children's future as we work together to pass an ordinance that is strong and is implemented and considered fair for everyone. I'm here to listen. I'm here to learn more. I also want to thank my colleague, Councillor O'Malley, for being a champion on this issue. I don't pretend to know everything about this subject, but I'm here to learn, here to listen. And thank you to Councillor O'Malley for providing us colleagues on the City Council as a resource on all things about the environment and how it impacts residents and how it impacts neighborhoods. Thank you, Councillor O'Malley, and thank you, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
I know this is a long hearing, so I'll be really short and sweet. Thank you, Councillor O'Malley, for your leadership on all issues environment, and for filing this, of course, and for making sure that a lot of folks were engaged. We got a lot of emails of folks who are going to be participating. I know it's a long hearing, so I look forward to listening. I have to leave a little early, but I will follow up with you as a sponsor of the legislation. And thank you to all the residents for their advocacy as well. Thank you. And of course, thank you to the administration.
We've also been joined by Councillor Braden. Councillor Mejia.
Thank you to the chair, and thank you to Councillor O'Malley for sponsoring this incredibly important ordinance. Building in Boston contributes to nearly 3/4 of all greenhouse gas emission in the city. Between rising temperatures and sea levels, we are at a crucial moment when it comes to climate change in our city. We cannot wait any longer to do something about it. We must reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to meet our Boston goals to be net zero carbon by 2050. And we can't do it without targeting the big greenhouse gas emitters. An updated BERDO creates multiple pathways for building owners to meet the performance standards, including on-site energy efficiency improvements, purchasing clean energy, and alternative compliance payments. Which is ACP funds will be used to support other emission reduction projects with a focus on environmental justice communities. We are proud to have signed on to this ordinance, and we look forward to seeing it pass soon. Thank you again to the sponsor and to the Sierra Club for your advocacy and all of the advocates that are here to move this good work forward.
Thank you. Councillor Sabi George.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the lead sponsor on this. I don't have much to add. Colleagues have said most of it, especially the lead sponsor. So I look forward to today's hearing and continuing to really have a deeper understanding of BERDO and BERDO 2.0 and the benefits it will bring our city. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the sponsor. I am here to just express my full support. I support the aims. I support the coalition. I support the sponsor, knowing how much this represents in some ways the initial sort of a coming full circle of the foundation that has been laid throughout the body of his work on this body for so many years. And I just want to add one point now, because I'm not sure how much I will be able to say on when it comes time for the direct back and forth. But, you know, we've already started to hear from some folks that there is a push to, you know, agree with the aims, but maybe slow down or wait to see if maybe the state will act and something might impact this, or, you know, not to be too premature. And I just really want to emphasize, if nothing else, the urgency of the city of Boston taking every possible step within our power and more to try to set the standard and drive momentum for climate justice. And so I stand fully on board and look forward to doing everything I can to support not just the passage of this, but speedy passage and implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brayton.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Councillor O'Malley for his leadership on this issue. You know, as we watch the news from Europe and in the Northwest and hear of temperatures hitting 117 degrees in Portland because of climate change due to human activity generating greenhouse gases, etc. This is a moment when we just have to act with great urgency and take every measure we can to reduce our emissions and be a leader in this area. Boston will be greatly impacted by the rising sea levels and the impacts of climate change as we go forward. And this is a moment where we need to step up and enact this legislation as soon as possible. Thank you, and I look forward to the conversation this afternoon.
And are there any other councillors that joined? If not, I'm going to say some brief remarks, and then we will go to the administrative panel. Okay. I'll just say I'm honored to represent, I think, the district with the most waterfront. And so climate change and the impacts of climate change on my community is readily apparent every single day. Not only do we have the most waterfront, East Boston especially is an environmental justice community, and dealing with the impacts of classism, racism, and environmental racism specifically, and how and what infrastructure we chose to build in and around a working class community for generations. We're inheriting a lot of that. But now we're also in a displacement crisis because we're building so much in East Boston, especially throughout the district. So this ordinance especially meets this moment. I want to thank you, Councillor O'Malley, for your leadership because of the communities such as East Boston dealing with overdevelopment and an environmental just community. We need the buildings that are being built to be sustainable and to be adding, not subtracting from our clean air and our water quality in East Boston. Moreover, I understand that in the first attempt to get this done, there were some concessions made, and we're coming back to put in certain standards and to make sure it's as robust as possible. And I'm looking forward to that as well. So I'm excited to get this conversation going. For everybody who is going to be giving opinions and thoughts, we're not going to really touch down into the language like I normally do in a working session. This is about the concept. These are about general concerns. These are about general benefits. And if you have language suggestions, I highly recommend you send them to ccc.go@boston.gov. We will not be able to go into the in-depth legal standards and language today because of the amount of people who want to talk. So that's my concern, or that's my note. We're now going to go to the administration panel. We will, and I believe we will be kicking it off with Chief Mariama White-Hammond.
Hello. So we will start with Alison Brizius, who will present first, and then I'll follow. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, counselors, for having us here today. I'd like to speak briefly to the development of the standard, the key policy elements, and then turn it over to my colleagues to share more about its effect on equity, workforce opportunities, affordable housing, and public health. This ordinance update is the result of years of considered analysis and extensive stakeholder engagement. The 2018 Carbon-Free Boston Report proposed such a policy as a key strategy needed in order to achieve our carbon neutrality goals as a city. And the subsequent 2019 Climate Action Plan update identified this standard as a necessary and immediate next step and one of the most impactful policies that we could pursue to ensure that Boston is on that path. Over the last 18 months, we have convened a technical analysis group led by Synapse Energy Economics, including experts in building science, operations, construction, architecture, engineering, healthcare, renewable energy, and more. A residents advisory group led by One Square World and community partners, including Alternatives for Community and Environment, the Chinese Progressive Association, New England United for Justice, and City Life Vida Urbana, brought residents into the policy design process. The goal of this group was to develop a standard that minimizes harms and maximizes the benefits and opportunities for Boston's frontline populations. We also held community-wide open houses and convened numerous groups to focus on the unique challenges and contexts and opportunities for healthcare, affordable housing, higher education, real estate and commercial tenants, cultural institutions, labor, and more. A building emissions performance standard sets greenhouse gas emission targets, air pollution targets for existing buildings that decrease over time. As Councillor O'Malley said, the updated policy expands the range of covered buildings to 20,000 square feet or larger. But at the same time, it also gives those buildings and their owners more time to understand their emissions and plan for their future targets with the support of the city. And by setting out those targets today for the next 30 years and identifying those pathways to achieve the targets, we're providing long planning horizons for these covered buildings. We've been working with stakeholders to ensure that we've developed a policy that is flexible. Building owners have the flexibility in how they set their targets. They can choose from a default table that sets targets based on a building's unique use type, or develop individual compliance plans, treat themselves as a portfolio, or apply for a custom hardship plan for a unique context. They also have flexibility in how they can meet their targets. They can choose from a combination of on-site energy efficiency measures, electrification and fuel switching, procurement of renewable energy, or an investment in equitable emissions reduction across the city. By providing these many pathways, buildings can choose how and when to make these investments while ensuring that they are staying on the pathway to decarbonization. We have also developed a policy that is adaptive. With performance standards that are technology agnostic, buildings can continue to take advantage of the latest research, technology, and new products as they come to market. All buildings can take advantage of decarbonization of the grid or that of any district energy system, and custom pathways are provided for buildings with unique energy system challenges. We know that a carbon neutral Boston is also a resilient Boston, and this policy provides the flexibility needed to address buildings' unique resilience needs while decarbonizing. And finally, we've been working with residents to ensure that we've developed a policy that is designed to accomplish strategic emissions reduction while prioritizing benefits to environmental justice communities, green jobs, and providing transparency and accountability for all involved. Specifically, it establishes a new emissions reduction investment fund to be used for local projects that benefit environmental justice populations, prioritize improvements in indoor air quality, increase housing affordability and stabilization, and support workforce opportunities and economic inclusion. It also creates a new emissions review board with strong community representation and governance. If you would allow me, I'd like to add my thanks to those that the councilors have already given. I'd like to thank Aladin Juroff at the Harvard Emmett Environmental Law and Policy Clinic for her wonderful support throughout the process in legal analysis and development of the standard. I'd like to add thanks for ACE, One Square World, Synapse Energy Economics, the Greater Boston Labor Council, the Chinese Progressive Association, New England United for Justice, City Life Vida Urbana, as well as the interpreters and artists who help make those meetings possible and engaging. Thanks to the NRDC, the Bloomberg American Cities Climate Challenge, the Green Ribbon Commission, the panelists speaking today, all of our many advisory group members and stakeholder participants for your expertise. It has truly been and will continue to be a group effort. I look forward to your questions. I thank you for your time, and I'd like to turn it over to Chief White-Hammond, who will speak more about the broader goals of the policy.
So thank you, Allison. And I want to thank again the counselors for their time. I know this is a busy time of year and really so thankful to see so many counselors making the time to be here today. As Councilor O'Malley mentioned, our changing climate is causing sea level rise, extreme heat, and stormwater flooding in Boston. And we've seen that this summer alone, as we've had heat waves in June like never before. And as right now in July, we are on track to set a record for stormwater. So I am here on behalf of Mayor Janey, who knows the disproportionate impact that these situations have on our most socially vulnerable populations. And she's committed to taking action to ensure the health and safety of Boston residents. Boston will benefit from a building performance standards through the creation of great jobs that pay well and allow you to take care of your family, and all sectors related to buildings, from architectural, engineering, equipment sales, installation. There are so many opportunities for people to find good work in this work. Boston families will also benefit with lower utility bills and improved air quality as we work to make sure that we are maximizing the efficiency in our buildings. By implementing this ordinance, Boston will become more resilient, and that is especially important for community of color and other vulnerable groups that have been disproportionately impacted by climate change. Often when people ask me how I define environmental justice, I have this simple answer. There must be equity between the benefits and the burdens. And we have found that the city has been booming over the last 20 years. There are many who have benefited from this great growth and economic activity in the city of Boston, but there are many who have not seen the same benefits. In the way we've set up this building performance standard, we are asking for those who have benefited during Boston's boom to be at the front of leading the effort to protect our communities and our city from the realities of climate change. If we take action now, the cost will be significantly lower than if we continue to wait and ask future generations to bear the burden of our inaction. And so we see this as a real opportunity, particularly also including the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund that will give us an opportunity to support the kind of work across the city that will be important to make sure that climate justice is achieved so that those who have contributed the least to the problem of climate change do not continue to bear the greatest burden. I want to thank all of our partners at D&D, BPHC, BHA, OWD, and the many stakeholders who contributed time and effort to the policy development process. This ordinance is another step in a long process of Boston taking action on our climate goals. We know that it is not enough to write things down on paper. if the policies do not follow those plans. I want to thank all of my predecessors dating back to 2013 when BERDO was first passed under Mayor Menino. And I want to thank Chris Cook and Mayor Walsh for shepherding this process over the last 18 months. Mayor Janey and I are glad to take the baton and move this to the next phase. And we are particularly grateful for the chance to collaborate with Councilor O'Malley in bringing this forward and with Councilor Edwards for stewarding this in her committee. When the first phase of BERDO passed, I remember there was a lot of crying and gnashing of teeth, as well as predictions that just reporting emissions would destroy the real estate industry. I would like to tell you I am here to report that 8 years later, the real estate industry is still thriving in Boston. It's doing really well. And in the last couple of weeks, I have received letters, potentially of a similar sort, from a number of large building owners, once again predicting that the passage of this ordinance will lead to their demise. I do want to take a moment to thank Beacon Capital Partners, whose letter you will hear later, for being courageous in supporting this and naming the need to move our building sector to the point of action. Now, I'm a minister, a person of faith, which means that I believe in the possibility of fantastical things. But I must admit that I have serious doubts about the assertions that this ordinance will cause the sky to fall. Nonetheless, I can say with scientific certainty that the seas are rising. That is not an assertion, that is a reality. And now is the time for us to save ourselves and our city. We think it is only the right thing to do to ask those who have done so well to step out and take leadership so that all of us can thrive and survive in this new climate reality. And with that, I want to turn it over to Jessica Boatwright, from the Deputy Director for Neighborhood Housing and Development.
Before you go, Jessica, first of all, I'm inspired. I feel like I was taken to church. So that was amazing. I'm sorry. That was completely amazing, Chief. And I did want to acknowledge, if I hadn't said it before, we've been joined by Councilor Bach. So I just try to get the councilors in when they come in. Turning it over now to Jessica, I would not, you get to follow the great Chief / Pastor right now. Enjoy.
Thank you, councilors. Thank you, Councilor Edwards, for giving me a breath after that really great introduction. Again, I'm Jessica Boatwright. I'm Deputy Director for Neighborhood Housing Development for the Department of Neighborhood Development. And I'm joined today by 3 D&D team members who've been really played instrumental roles in partnering with the Environment Department on this, Jay Lee, John Forback, and Joseph Backer. Thank you so much for having us here today. I'm really pleased to be in front of the council again to discuss the importance of moving the policy agenda to make a carbon neutral Boston. D&D's had a strong partnership with the Environment Department on the path to zero emissions and the importance of changing the way new buildings are built and existing buildings are retrofitted and operated. In 2019, we kicked off a participatory planning process to create new zero carbon standards for all city-funded affordable housing new construction. These standards are now part of our design guidelines, and they're a requirement for all new construction moving forward. It's timely now to address emissions reductions in existing buildings. Our staff has continued the cross-agency partnership on the policy for existing buildings that we are talking about today. We've worked together to proactively seek out conversations with affordable housing operators in creating an approach to zero emissions. We know that these will be important partners in continued refinement of the details of the proposed regulations and beyond. We are glad to see that there will be funding to help these property owners and that the policy has the flexibility necessary to help affordable housing buildings achieve the targets within their specific funding cycles and regulatory frameworks. We are committed to making Boston a healthy city full of buildings that are not only efficient, but also healthy and comfortable for their residents. The policy under discussion today will help us achieve this shared goal. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over now to Eugene Barros from the Boston Public Health Commission.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Eugene Barros, again, from the Boston Public Health Commission. I'm the Director of Healthy Homes and Community Supports, and I'm here to testify on behalf of the Boston Public Health Commission and support of proposed amendments to the Building Energy Report and Disclosure Ordinance. We support this ordinance because climate changes and air quality are critical public health issues, and reducing emissions for our large buildings is an important step forward as we work to make Boston Public Health Commission's health equity and racial justice goals as a reality. Over the past year, the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the existing inequities in our communities, and the most vulnerable Bostonians have been hit hard by the pandemic, particularly people of color, low-income residents, and our frontline workers.
Mr.
Yes.
Barrow, I apologize for interrupting. I just found out that our interpretation is not working. So as a matter of inclusion, we're going to pause this hearing until we figure out what's going on to make sure everyone can participate. So I'm going to take a brief recess. I don't have a gavel, I'm just saying that. And I apologize for interrupting, but I need to make sure that everyone is able to participate. 1 second. Apologies, folks. We'll get started shortly. We think we fixed it.
Madam Chair, should Mr. Barrows continue? Madam Chair? She may have. Madam Chair, should Mr. Barrows continue?
Yeah, I apologize. We're trying to fix it. So if you want to go ahead, Mr. Barrows, and then we'll see. It might be on the receiving end of this particular person. So please.
Okay, so as I was saying, during the past year, with the pandemic has highlighted existing inequities in our communities, and the most vulnerable Bostonians have been hit hard by the pandemic, particularly people of color, low-income residents, and other frontline workers. And these are the same individuals that are disproportionately impacted and most threatened by climate change. And climate change, together with other natural disasters and human-made health stressors, influence human health and disease in numerous ways. Some existing health threats will intensify and new health threats will emerge. Not everyone is equally at risk. Important considerations include age, economic resources, and geographic locations. And in the U.S., public health can affect by disruption of physical, biological, and ecological systems, including disturbance originating here and elsewhere. The health effects of this disruption include asthma, increased respiratory and cardiovascular diseases, injuries, and premature deaths related to extreme weather events, change in the prevalence and geographical distribution of food and waterborne illness and other infectious disease, and threats to mental health. In addition to climate change consideration, this ordinance will make our housing stock healthier and have a positive impact on air quality. We know that improved indoor and outdoor air quality can lower the risk of certain conditions such as heart disease, stroke, asthma, lung cancer, and respiratory infections. In our work at Boston Public Health Commission under my division, the Healthy Homes Division, we see the health impacts of air quality every day. Housing conditions and indoor air quality play a major role in asthma control and management. Exposure to allergens has strong association with asthma severity. And according to Robert Wood Johnson Foundation asthma research, about 40% of asthma episodes are caused by by housing-based pollutants. Again, it is important to note that these health risks are not distributed equally across the population. Black, Latinx, immigrant, and low-income population in Boston across the United States have the highest asthma rates compared to white population, and also are more likely to live in substandard housing. These populations are at a greater risk for adverse health effects from poor housing, extreme temperature fluctuations, and pollutants that are linked to deadly, such as nitrogen dioxide released by building gas, which has been linked to cause death in people with asthma, and other pollutants emitted released from fuels such as oil and diesel operated heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. At BPHC, we're here to tackle these issues through programs such as Breathe Easy at Home, which is a partnership between Boston Public Health Commission and Inspection Service Department. This program is a web-based referral system that allows doctors and nurses and other health professionals to refer their patients, Boston patients with asthma, for home inspections conducted by Boston Inspection Service. This program works with the landlords to ensure that the housing violations are repaired. The Emissions Reduction Investment Fund created by this ordinance would also provide new opportunities for projects that prioritize indoor air quality, among other projects that benefit environmental justice population. In closing, BPHC strongly supports this ordinance because it holds a promise to improve the health and well-being of Boston residents, especially for Black, Latinx, immigrant, and other low-income residents most impacted by asthma and climate change. Thank you so much for your time. And now I'll turn it over to Richard McGinnis. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilor O'Malley, and members of the council. My name is Richard McGinnis. I'm Deputy Director for Climate Change and Environmental Planning from the Boston Planning and Development Agency. The BPDA offers its support for amendments to the Building Energy Reporting Disclosure Ordinance. These updates have been long in the works, commencing with Carbon-Free Boston and the Climate Action Plan, two planning efforts with which the BPDA was engaged. We thank Mayor Janey and her administration, Chief White Hammond, and Dr. Brizius for keeping this matter on schedule, and we're available for any questions the council may have during the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now turn it over to some public testimony. As I had mentioned before, there were some members of the community, we'll get their names again, who are coming in, grandmother and granddaughter, who would like to testify. After them, we will have Walter Armstrong and Andy Krasner. While we're waiting for the family to come and testify, we'll go ahead and go to Walter Armstrong. So I understand it's actually a group of folks who speak Cantonese who'd like to testify. So could someone, I don't know if they're, is it so? Okay, if Walter's not there, we're going to go to Andy Krasner.
Counselor, I am here.
Oh, okay.
I am
okay,
here.
Walter, go ahead.
Sorry. Good afternoon. My name is Walter Armstrong, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Capital Facilities and Engineering at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. As one of several healthcare and institutions in the Longwood medical area that strive to provide the Boston community with access to high quality care, Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center commends Council President O'Malley, Committee Chair Councilor Edwards, and the entire City Council for your overwhelming commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and address the impacts of climate change. The LMA is home to mission-driven, not-for-profit organizations that deeply understand the public health impacts of climate change and how residents in disadvantaged communities have been disproportionately affected. In the context of our patient care, teaching and research missions, reducing energy usage and lowering emissions is critical to our core work. We are very proud to have voluntarily implemented measures, numerous energy conservation measures resulting in reduced greenhouse gas emissions, as most recently documented by the Green Ribbon Commission. As we all know, the healthcare and biomedical institutions in the LMA operate 24/7, 365 inpatient care facilities, and our research labs follow the same schedule as we doggedly pursue the cure for the most troubling diseases and develop vaccines to combat a global pandemic, as we have done recently at BIDMC with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Additionally, the institutions in the LMA purchase almost all of their electric, steam, and chilled water supplies from Maytep, the nearby privately owned district energy plant that is fueled primarily by natural gas. As recently noted by the Green Ribbon Commission in their analysis of healthcare emissions, even highly efficient district energy plants like Maytep will need to develop long-term decarbonization strategies to achieve the goal of zero carbon emissions by 2050. We look forward to working collaboratively with you on a path for district energy and the healthcare and biomedical institutions connected to Maytep. I want to again thank Council President for his partnership as we seek to make our operations and our buildings more efficient. I will conclude my comments by reiterating my organization's commitment to meet the goals of the proposed ordinance. As all the councilors noted in their opening remarks, there really is no other alternative, either locally or globally. We look forward to the working sessions and collaborating with all of you during this process. And thank you again for the time today.
Thank you very much. If it's okay, we'll go ahead and have Andy Krasner go, and then we do have a group of 5 individuals who will be testifying with Jennifer. See, I think it's with Jennifer Chen. So Andy, if you would do your testimony, and then we're going to turn it over to these the individuals.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of the council, thank you for your commitment to climate mitigation. We really appreciate it. My name is Andy Krasner, and I'm a longtime volunteer with Mothers Out Front JP team, and I am the manager of climate and health for Greater Boston Physicians for Social Responsibility. GBPSR represents 750 members in the health field, and we work on the gravest threats to health, climate change being one of them. In January 2020, this council unanimously passed a resolution recognizing the climate crisis as the health emergency that it is, and we've all heard that in testimony today, and we thank you for that. Over 100 public health and health organizations agree, including the American Medical Association and GBPSR. Our buildings are a key driver of this emergency. The BERDO update addresses the driver and is based on the principles in the Green Ribbon Commission's Carbon Free Boston report and a pillar of the Boston Climate Action Plan. The data are absolutely clear. We cannot reach our 2050 targets without this update, and there's actually no more time to waste. By passing the BERDO update, Boston gets a 3-for-1. We don't often get that. Building emission standards are not only good for the climate, they're really good for our health, as we've heard, and for health equity. A Harvard study released in May of this year showed that air pollution from burning fossil fuels in buildings alone, not from cars, just buildings alone, cost the Commonwealth at least $8.4 billion in health impacts. As you've already heard, improving air quality will improve productivity and result in reductions of premature death in stroke, asthma, and heart attacks. Prioritizing funding for updating buildings in environmental justice communities is essential because it can improve resilience to heat and improve air quality. And the reason this is so important in a city like Boston is because we have 1 in 8 children with an asthma diagnosis. They are more sensitive to lower amounts of pollution. So this is essential for them. And by supporting and implementing the BERDO update as introduced, the council will be making Boston healthier, and most importantly, preserving a livable climate for the next generation. And really, we owe them no less. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So up next, we do have, as I mentioned, a group of folks to testify. We could start with Jennifer Chen.
Hi. Okay. I just start, right? Okay.
Take it down.
Okay. Hello, my name is Jennifer Chen, and I just graduated high school at Josiah Quincy Upper School, the school in Chinatown. I'm currently living in the South End and part of the Chinese Progressive Association. As someone who travels to Chinatown often by foot, I can really feel the difference in the change in temperature when transitioning from a different neighborhood. I remember the temperature was only in the low 80s that day, and I was waiting for a friend outside for only 5 minutes, and I had a heat stroke. And if someone as young as me could have a heat stroke, it made me more concerned about the more vulnerable generations like my grandmother, who's much older. Just the thought of her passing out from a simple walk is really frightening. Like, how would you feel if you had a loved one who had a heat stroke from only standing a few minutes outside? Carbon emissions are creating inequality in the way we breathe. If we don't reduce the carbon emissions, we will not only be promoting air pollution, but also contributing to climate change that's been a pressing issue as of today. With the rise of climate change is the rise in heat waves that we've been experiencing this summer, and it's dreadful. And if Boston's goal is to be carbon neutral by 2050, we need to start now rather than later. The future of Boston residents is literally in the air, which is why we should act now before there are irreversible effects. This is why I want to bring emphasis on the importance of reducing carbon emissions through the BEPS policy. The health benefits of the BEPS outweigh the cost, and not only will it help conserve energy, it will be a step closer to healing the environment. Quitting carbon emissions is an option, but quitting breathing is not. Lastly, I would like to thank my counselor, Ed Flynn, for also bringing awareness on this pressing issue in this community. Thank you. Do I pass it to my grandmother? Okay, you can go. Okay.
Hello， 大家好啊！我係 Jennifer 嘅媽媽。咁咪Jennifer， 我通過 Jennifer 呢件事呢，即係佢舊年前呢咁咪去買嘢呢，咁咪暈低咗之後係由於嗰日嘅天氣係好熱。咁我諗啊，如果個天氣係繼續咁熱咧，咁啊對我哋將來啲小朋友啦，同我哋啲老年人應該係有好大嘅影響嘅。因為波士頓喺唐街嗰度呢係非常之熱，因為佢嗰啲矮樓呢又冇隔熱層，咁啊樹又少，所以佢嗰日行起嚟呢就係應該係1個鐘啊，咁啊佢已經係熱到佢喘唔到氣啦。咁我哋平時咁咪去到嗰個天下圍宮嗰度呢，咁咪就行嗰10零20分鐘去到嗰度，真係越行就越熱，越行到唐街就越係熱，因為佢嗰度係水泥地，屋又矮，更加酷落嚟咯啊！真係非常之熱，我覺得呢個唐街嗰個氣候係非常之熱啦，咁啊我哋點去改善呢？咁我就想提嘅意見呢，就係話，好似唐人街咁，你話講就講咗好多年啦，嗰個氣候變化點去處理啊？咁啊，即係雷聲大啦，熱點少啦，我覺得係咪需要翻譯㗎
？She said, there is someone interpreting, right? Or is she?
And I'm on mute. So my mistake, I should have announced for all of us who do not speak Cantonese to click on the interpretation channel and switch to English, which none of us probably did. And so as a result,
I tried to for some reason. I couldn't, I didn't get the interpretation. I clicked English though, but I don't know. It didn't work for me. I didn't know how to work it.
Okay. So Jennifer, would you be willing to summarize? And then we can switch over, or try to switch over on the global channel on the rest of our.
My Chinese isn't that great, so, but
what I recommend then is, this is my mistake, so I apologize. If everyone can try and click on the English channel on the global on your Zoom. And you know what? Welcome to the world of a huge amount of people in Boston. So, and I apologize for backing us into this world this way, but welcome to the world of a lot of people who don't speak English as a first language. So let's try it. We're going to click on the English channel, and due to my mistake, if we can have Pei-Ying do her testimony, and we're here for it. So.
Oh, so she does it again?
She can go again if she'd like.
Me to Lily.
Could you explain it was my mistake though? That's why she has to do it again?
Yeah, 佢翻譯而家佢係搞錯咗。
Okay. 大家好啊，我叫余佩英，係 Jennifer 嘅嫲嫲。咁啊，我即係舊年時呢就係咁咪佢就我又叫個孫啦，我哋去買啲餐啦，咁佢就去買餐。咁啊去咗1個鐘多啲咧，咁佢就覺得已經係暈低就喺度啦，因為嗰日係好熱。咁我覺得你嘅天氣嘅變化係好大啊，咁咪即係熱到喘唔到氣嘅時候，即係一個人喘唔到氣呢就會暈低。咁你邊個翻譯嘅今日？佢哋講緊。你繼續咩？
Melissa Lowe from the office, from the city of Boston. So we're all hearing it in English. She won't hear it, but we are.
佢講係而家聽緊英文，用使排斥。
咁我通過個孫咁咪暈低呢件事呢，我覺得係真係好擔心啦。因為如果個天氣係咁嘅話，將來啲小朋友啦，咁咪即係都有好大嘅影響。因為我自己都本身都有呢個感覺，因為早段時間你係有一個係嗰個議員啊，韋德華呢，咁佢咪組織嗰個睡獅嘅喺唐街舞獅，咁我就行去到，即係我喺呢度行去到都係10零20分鐘點啊，行去到嗰度，因為入到唐人街嗰度真係特別熱，真係有棵樹，嗰啲矮，嗰啲屋又嗰啲樓又矮。咁你個天氣酷落嚟，加上地面呢都係水泥嘅，咁去到牌樓嗰度已經係唞唔到氣㗎啦。咁我覺得呢個氣候點去改善呢？咁咪係一個好值得我哋思考嘅問題。咁我而家又係喺度諗呢，咁咪同街嗰啲矮樓啊，咁咪可唔可以暫時咧，即係好資助少少嗰啲經費啊，俾嗰啲小業主啊。加建嗰個隔熱層啊，睇下叫我去用少啲煤氣啊，用少啲煤氣，咁就應該係廢氣就係少啲咯。咁啊，另外一個咯，咁咪暫時咯，咁咪可以，如果有80度以上啦，咁啊可以話用灑水車啦，咁喺啲街嗰度灑水啦，降下溫啦，咁應該係好啲啦。OK， 我係咁多啦。多謝。
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, I apologize and thank you for your patience. I am now, there's an institute, oh, sorry, there are a couple other folks from the Chinese Progressive Youth Organization that wanted to go ahead at this time. And we're going to allow them to go ahead. I'll just call out, make sure they're all on. So up next is Ming Mei, followed by Emily Zhao, then Jason Wong, then Dexon Ma.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ming Mei, and I'm a rising senior at Boston Latin School. I am currently living in South Boston, and I am part of the Chinese Progressive Association. I used to live in Chinatown, but moved to South Boston, partly because the air circulation is not as good in Chinatown compared to other neighborhoods, perhaps due to the multiple highways and residential buildings. The school that I went to, Josiah and Quincy Elementary School, was built right next to a residential building. I remember the times during recess where I see smoke or gas coming from the buildings right next to our playground. I also recognize that there are a few of my friends that go to the exact same school have asthma, and long-term exposure to polluted air particles can really irritate airway, causing difficulty in breathing. It was very disappointing to me when they had to sit aside until recess was over. Even until today, I still worry about their physical health. It is crucial to reduce or eliminate air pollution as it may affect children's health. The BEPS policy improves the air quality of the environment, which is essential to everyone. If we want Boston to become carbon neutral by 2050, everyone must take action and expedite the process of practicing the new building emission performance standard now. Lastly, I would like to thank all the counselors for their leadership on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. We had Emily Zhao. Hi, Emily.
Hello, my name is Emily Zhao, and I am a rising junior at Boston Latin School, currently living in Brighton and part of the Chinese Progressive Association. The city of Boston has a goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2050, but that goal will never be reached if action is not taken and if expectations are set low. In the overall community, the building emission standard must be set high and carbon emissions must be lowered. This is because air pollution is a huge problem in the city of Boston, and long-term air pollution is detrimental to the overall health of our community. Those most at stake are those with underlying health conditions, elders, and children. As a previous resident of Chinatown, Chinatown is the most polluted neighborhood in Boston, with over 50% of the students at the Josiah Quincy Elementary School with asthma. In addition to being part of that 50%, I have an underlying health condition which makes people like me more susceptible to poor air quality in Boston. The environment one lives in has a big impact on one's health, and poor air quality can quickly lead to worsening health conditions, preventing people like me from going outside. After moving to Brighton, the air quality hasn't gotten much better. There is still a huge amount of fossil fuels emitted from buildings. By establishing this policy, health hazards will be significantly reduced, buildings with inadequate heating and cooling systems will be improved, and it will help people save a lot of money. The overall neighborhood will be more environmentally friendly, and the use of energy-efficient appliances and lighting systems are installed. I emphasize again that air pollution is a huge problem. Standards need to be set high, and now is the time to act, as this problem will only get worse. Everyone must take part, and there should not be an option to opt out of meeting the standards through offsets. Finally, I want to thank the counselors for their leadership on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason Wong? He's in attendees. Okay. And Dexon Ma. Well, and I'll get Jason.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, my name is Texima and I'm a rising junior at John D. O'Brien. I am currently living in Chinatown and am part of the Chinese Progressive Association. As a resident of Chinatown, I would like to address the issues surrounding high pollution levels in my community. As a person who lives in Chinatown, I can't help but realize the quality of the air we breathe in has degraded over time. I am worried for the health of not only myself, but my community members as well. Over the years, I've noted a steady decline in my physique due to the negative effects of the poor air quality. My lungs are becoming weaker and it makes it difficult to breathe. As a person who enjoys doing sports and other activities, it is painful for me to go through such experience. As much as I love the community, I can't overlook the dangerous flaws as it could damage the future of our generation. I believe the main issue and cause of this problem is due to the lack of care Chinatown receives. A prime example would be the trash-filled streets that emits the strong stench that doesn't properly represent Chinatown. Another main problem would be the highway that brings a load of air pollution due to the tens and thousands of vehicles that drive across. Another root to the problem would be the lack of knowledge surrounding the situation. Upon further research, I learned of other negative side effects that others should take into consideration. If the community were to understand the harms, they would be more likely to take action. Due to my involvement with the Chinese Progressive Association, I've become more knowledgeable of how dangerous the air pollution level in Chinatown truly was. I want to devote my time to preventing further damage to the younger generation. As a result, I would like to support the building emissions performance standard policy and spread awareness of pollution issues in Chinatown. Thank you for listening to my side of the story.
Thank you all so much. And Jason Huang, I believe yep, I see you.
Hello, my name is Jason Hong. I'm a rising junior at John D. O'Brien, and I am currently living near Chinatown, and I'm a part of CPA and COI. I'm here to talk about some of the problems that's concerning health problems that may be caused due to neglect, pollution, and air quality roaming around Chinatown. It's very concerning to see that as the population of Chinatown rises, nothing is being done to prevent these factors, and it will eventually affect the state of these residents and future citizens. As a person with asthma, I know how troublesome the air quality will cause to the residents within their performance, health, and other reason issues. Due to me getting asthma, it made me performing physical activities more difficult to do without acknowledging the fact that it makes it harder to breathe properly and shorten the amount of oxygen that travels through my lungs. But we cannot stop estate companies and building owners from producing carbon emission into the air. It will help prevent many more people residing in Chinatown from experiencing similar health problems. And if this is left untreated, then it may cause a worse amount of symptoms to emerge and devastatingly limit citizens' health. In order to prevent these issues from happening to future and current generations, I promote that the BEPS, Building Emission Performance Standards policy, should be in place to help counteract these problems and to help benefit the society and environment to become more clear and cleaner for the citizens to live. The BEPS policy will help bring cleaner installment to reduce carbon emissions and bring more renewable energy to be used as well. Currently, Chinatown is labeled as the most polluted place within Boston. Now, I think it's no surprise, judging by the amount of cars that are driven through the highways and a lot of polluted and disgusting areas. With the BEPS policy, it will help change Chinatown for the better and help maintain order. Even though it might not completely reduce all the carbon emission, it will be a first step to create a better conditions. As society is advancing, we should also consider the further increase in desire for a more favorable and safer environment to live in. So I'm here to state that the air pollution is a big problem that cannot be avoided nor neglected, as it will cause serious harms and health concerns to people. We should quickly eliminate this problem as soon as possible, or else there might be irreversible effects that will come if we left this issue unsolved. In order for Boston to become carbon neutral by 2050, everyone needs to be involved within this solution by signing and advocating for the BEPS policy to pass. I would like to thank the council for their guidance and leadership for bringing light into this issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I'm going to go back to counselors who can ask the administration questions, concerns, and thoughts. I'm going to, of course, kick it off to the lead sponsor, who will then take over for a little bit after and then I will return. But Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of those who just testified, particularly the young people. It's very inspiring, and I remember testifying as a high school student for a city council meeting, so I look forward to following the career of these young leaders in the future, but thank you all. Given the fact that we have 2 additional panels after this and then quite a bit of public testimony, I'm going to limit my question to 1. I will then go to Councilor Flynn and then Councilor Mejia. Obviously, I use as much time as you want, but if we could keep it around 5 minutes, that would be ideal. And just the very simple question I'll give to Dr. Brezius and Chief White Hammond. Are you, or have you, or will you, and I know the answer to this question, make your department available to business owners who may have questions specifically on how this ordinance will affect them and walk through what the process would be or what resources are available? Can you just speak briefly about your outreach to the impacted businesses and how we're going to work with them to make sure this is done well?
So absolutely, Councilor, and the short answer is yes. We have been, since we began this process 18 months ago, had an open door to any building owner, property manager, anyone else who is confused, concerned, interested to understand how their building is performing, how the standards might affect them, and the opportunity and strategies they can take. As part of this, we're also developing additional resource hubs and support for building owners and tenants to work throughout this process. Chief, do you want anything?
No, I just think that the other good thing about this, that maybe people are sort of getting a little bit lost is we're going to be all in this together. And that means that one of the really great things is now each building may not just have to figure it out on their own, but we have opportunities because large numbers of buildings have to move forward to really see, are there possibilities that people could bundle for discounts? I think moving together and asking everyone to move actually creates an opportunity for us to move forward faster. So I caution those who might be concerned. It matters to us that this works. We're not just trying to be punitive. We're trying to not find ourselves all stuck in a dinghy in the middle of the ocean. And we know that we have to do that together. And so we are excited to really not just help them, but actually to take the learning from one building and say, hey, maybe we can use what we've heard here to help this other group. And I think that that's the real opportunity when it's not just each individual making it up for themselves, but buildings actually and sectors being able to come together. We look forward. We hope the Chamber of Commerce will join with us. We'd like to sponsor webinars and hearings and opportunities to bring people in, give them access to the best thinking and information so that we can all move forward together.
Well said. And as I've sort of explained to folks, this is obviously an aggressive policy, but it's an achievable policy. The easiest thing in the world. We could pass an ordinance tomorrow mandating 50% cuts in greenhouse gas emissions by next year, and it would likely pass and be signed into law, but it would be very difficult to achieve. So what we're doing here is putting a deliberate blueprint, or green print as I like to call it, in place. And again, I just want to underscore, this is the council and the administration working like a hand in a glove. This isn't about, scoring points. This is about doing what we must do, what is our moral obligation to do for the people of this city and of this planet. So similarly, you and your team have been remarkable outreaching to folks. I will continue in this process. I spend, usually at least once a day, I'll happily meet with any group of activists or business folks. Had a lovely talk with Greg Vassell earlier today, who was advocating for the real estate board, and happy to do a virtual check-in with he and his members and anyone. So that will remain as we go through the process and once this is passed. So I'm going to leave my question at that. I think I don't see Councilor Flynn, so and I apologize if I skip you. Just turn your camera on and let me know. But I think Councilor Mejia is next, followed by Councilor Liz Braden after her. So Councilor Mejia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I know that Councilor Campbell was also on before me in case you don't see her. Okay, good. All right, so I just have a few questions. I'm curious more specifically kind of around the threats of fines. Besides just the threat of them, what can we do to encourage building operators to look at more energy efficient practices? And how can we utilize this moment to impact future developments as well? And then I just have two more questions for either the administration or whoever else wants to chime in. I'm open to hearing all voices here. For the Admissions Review Board, how are we going to work to ensure that the community members aren't just the same usual suspects? You know, what I've seen in Zooms and in rooms, it's always the same usual suspects that show up. And I think that this is really an opportunity for us to expand the conversation and create opportunities to bring people in. So I'm just curious about what sort of lived experience standards might we look into and when we're building this review board. And then how can we work to educate residents about buildings in their neighborhoods and bring them into this conversation so that the fight for energy reduction and efficiency is a community-driven effort. So curious about a lot of these community engagement. As you know, that's one of my biggest passions, Chief Hammond. And so I'm here to help support in however we can. And I know that multiple translation and interpretation is also part of that conversation, but I'm just curious around some of the rollout and what you're envisioning for the community engagement process.
Yeah, so I mean, this ordinance is a key part. We'll have a next layer of work we'll need to do on regulations, and we'll keep the same process that we have here. Bringing folks in, having conversations, particularly we did quite a few webinars going over the technical details since, you know, not everybody was just sitting around learning about energy policy. We tried to make this a process that also democratized information so that people could be active participants in the process. And we plan to keep that going. I think a couple of things in terms of the Emissions Review Board, we will obviously want to bring in new people, and we are committed to making sure that those who sit on the Emissions Review Board have the expertise and knowledge that they need to make strong decisions. I do want to push back a bit on the assertion that only folks within the industry are able to make strong decisions. I think I know how to learn, and I think a lot of people do too. I think a lot of the members of the council are folks who did not grow up doing energy policy, and people have been able to pull it together and learn. And so we know that our office will have to make sure that we provide the kind of technical expertise, sometimes needing to bring in consultants as to the board so that they have the information that they need. But I do really want to push back against the notion that only people who, you know, have spent the last 20 years working in development are able to make strong decisions that balance the ethics and the flexibility. And we need both. The other piece around, there was a question about fines. I want to be clear, fines are just one component of this. What we really want people to do is lean in and innovate to reduce their emissions. Now, you can't ask people to do something and then make it, if there be no impact if they do nothing, right? It is important that we're giving them a bunch of carrots and hoping never need to use any sticks. Like that is not, our hope is not to just hand out a bunch of fines. Our hope is to partner with our large building owners to put Boston on the map at the forefront of emissions reduction, which again, we can do when everybody's in it together. It's not one building by itself. It's all of the different sectors, all of the different buildings, and that is going to bring us the kinds of economies of scale, knowledge, and innovation that is going to allow this to really work. And I want to note that New York has already passed this, but I know that Boston is going to do this exceedingly better than New York, and I want to make sure that all of those folks who are saying we should slow down, if they're real members of Red Sox Nation, then we should be speeding up and getting out ahead so that we can be at the forefront, and I think we can do that. You asked one last question about new construction. We are already working with the BPDA around the net zero zoning policy. So this will make sure that new buildings don't construct themselves and then find themselves, 2 years later out of alignment. So we are already doing that work. And there's some people who said we should talk with the state. The state is not moving on these building emission standards, so we don't need to wait for them. That's not something that the state is currently doing, but the state is looking at zoning. And we will make sure that we, and the building code, we will make sure that those conversations happen so that we don't have something in Boston that's in competition with the state. We do want to work with them, but the work they are doing is not actually, there's nothing that will come out of the state that will preclude the things that we're talking about right now in this ordinance.
So thank you for that. I'm so incredibly encouraged that, this whole idea of like who is at the table, because oftentimes that is usually the same old. And not to say that there's wrong with that, but I just think that expanding that table will really provide some input and an opportunity to bring people into the conversations that have historically been left out, because then it becomes something that feels collective. So I really do appreciate that intentionality behind it. And I'm very encouraged. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, I'm here for all of it, and really thank Councilor O'Malley for his not only passion, but commitment to ensuring that we hold ourselves accountable to getting this passed before he departs. So we got this, and I'm here for all of it. So thank you, everybody, for being here and for bringing all of your passion into this work.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Braden, you are next, and then Councilor Bach, I believe. Apologies, we have a couple screens here, so if I'm missing a councilor, just let me know. But I think Councilor Braden, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm so incredibly encouraged by this conversation this afternoon. I live in an old house that's over 100 years old, and over many years we managed to increase our energy efficiency. Insulation, draft exclusion, rim sealing around our foundation, lots of things, and it's a small 2-family home. So, I think sometimes the challenge just seems insurmountable, and it's a huge it seems like a big challenge, but even small strategies can really help improve the efficiency of a building. And I'm so encouraged by this conversation. I don't really have any questions, only to just add my voice to the chorus of support for this initiative, and hope that we can get it across the finishing line in short order. So thank you all.
Thank you very much, Councilor Braden, and thank you for your great partnership as well. Councilor Kenzie Bach, the floor is yours, and thank you for joining us. If you want to say a quick opening statement before your questions, you can, because I think you missed the first round, so please.
Yes, thank you so much, Councilor O'Malley, and sorry to be late. I did catch most of the administration's presentation, but missed my colleagues. But I have gathered that I think colleagues said pretty much what I would say, which is the time is now. Actually, the time was a decade or more ago. But here we are, and time only moves in one direction, at least for us. And so we need to do what we can and do it with speed and a sense of urgency. And I do think there's a fairly large gap between the way that our community is learning to talk about the urgency of climate change and the scale of urgent measures that we are actually taking. And what just so encourages me about this, and thank you to you for filing it, and to the administration, both Janie and Walsh, for all the work on this, is I feel like if we passed this, we would come some way towards starting to close that gap between kind of our rhetorical space we're in and kind of the reality of what we're doing. So really excited about this. I also just wanted to acknowledge, and maybe it's not necessarily a question, but maybe Chief, you could just talk a little bit about, because I think it underscores the point you were making before. I see in this, reading through the legislation, some significant efforts to think about the kind of bespoke cases and to create a sort of an alternative track for the buildings. I represent a number of historic churches, right? Which, like, when you measure the volumes and stuff it becomes very complicated with some of the typical calculations. And it's also just hard for them to figure out, in some cases, what are the mechanisms that they can do. And so I want to I want to highlight that my impression in talking to the administration about this and in reading the legislation is that there really has been quite a lot of work running up to this to think about what the exceptions are and what the places that are going to need like a sort of different track are. And instead of letting that complexity be a reason for inaction, to instead kind of bake an assumption that that complexity is there in. I guess if you could speak to that a little bit. And then also just bring out into the open, I mean, I do think that especially with that first set of alternative plans and this setting up this new review board, I assume that, you know, we would as a city need to look at expanding the environment department staff capacity for this. Can you speak to that aspect as well?
Yes, so I think the first thing is that we understand that buildings are unique, not quite as unique as people, but they all do have their own difference and so when you look at the way we calculated it, we expect different places, we expect different types of buildings to move at different paces. We expect different levels of energy use for buildings that are in 24-hour operation versus buildings that are more episodic. So I think we've spent a lot of time with some pretty informed experts to try to create some building categories that match the kinds of buildings that we have. Even within that, we recognize that one building might have different types of uses. And so we've even sort of said, let's drill down and sort of see how we can calculate for the different types of uses your building might have, and then build a plan that that sort of credits you for the different use types that we have. So I think we are really trying to be responsive and not have a one size fits all. But at the end of the day, we cannot put out a report called Carbon Free Boston 2050 and then say, you know, and I believe in the power of prayer, but prayer with sometimes requires moving your feet and taking a little action. And so what we're saying to people is, let's figure out what your pathway is. We're going to be flexible to the type of building that you have, but what we can't do is just leave it to chance. So you are also right. In order to really work with different kinds of institutions, we will probably need to increase staff capacity because we do want to be really responsive. We want to be able to give people the kind of expertise that they need and be able to engage them as they're working on their plans. And so we would appreciate having a conversation around that, and we'll need to think about that. But I think we also strongly believe, and I think my hope is that on the other side of this ordinance, and maybe even through this process, we can start working with the different trade associations and groups to start saying, how can we now create the subcommittees that begin to share information so that all of the different building types are benefiting from what each of them is learning, so we can all get there well together. So yes, we have baked in flexibility and paying attention to the specific needs. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is we're not going to get to 2050 on a hope and a prayer. And so this is giving people some really specifics about the targets we need to reach, and then we'll work with them to figure out the steps they can take to reach those targets.
Great, thanks so much. And Mr. Chair, I'm mindful of time and the many great speakers and allies we've got in this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. Thank you, Chief. I don't see any other councillors here. So hearing from none, we're going to move on to the next panel. I would ask our administration panel, if you are able to please stay on and just observe and feel free to chime in if you wish. But we're now going to ask the institutional panel to join us. I believe that all members are in, but if not, Kerry Jordan, perhaps you can let them in. I'm looking for John Cleveland, Executive Director of the Boston Green Ribbon Commission, Dennis Kahlberg, AVP for Sustainability of Boston University, Carol Wedge, CEO of Shepley Bullfinch, Norm Lamond, Sustainability Manager of Turner Construction, and Winston Vaughn, Master Director of Climate Solutions, Healthcare Without Harm. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to begin, John, as Executive Director of the Green Ribbon Commission, I'd like you to maybe kick things off, introduce the panel, and feel free to give your opening statements. Welcome.
Terrific. Thank you, Councilor O'Malley, and other members of the Boston City Council for this opportunity. My name is John Cleveland, and I'm the Executive Director of the Boston Green Ribbon Commission. As many of you know, the GRC is a voluntary network of 36 CEOs who have the mission of accelerating the implementation of the city's climate action plan by convening, organizing, and enabling leaders from Boston's key sectors. We've been partnering with the city on the development and implementation of the Climate Action Plan for over 10 years. We sponsored the Carbon Free Boston report that provided the detailed technical analysis for the city's roadmap to carbon neutrality. And based on this analysis, the city included a recommendation in the 2019 Climate Action Plan update to develop a carbon emissions performance standard to decarbonize existing large buildings, which this proposed ordinance does. This is a critical element of the city's plan to achieve carbon neutrality, and we urge the council to move forward on it with all due speed. At the request of Councilor O'Malley, we have organized a panel of individuals representing organizations that are members of the commission. This panel represents a diverse set of sectors, including commercial real estate, higher education, healthcare, construction, and architecture and engineering.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, so we've been moving boxes a little bit.
Sorry, Councilor Mejia, if you could just mute yourself, thank you.
Oh, my apologies. Okay. The panel includes the following individual. Al Scaramelli, who's Managing Director of Beacon Capital Partners. He wasn't available to be here today, but I'm going to read a short statement on behalf of Beacon Capital. Dennis Carlberg with Boston University, Carol Wedge with Shepley Bullfinch, Norm Lamond with Turner Construction, and Winston Vaughn with Healthcare Without Harm. So I'm going to begin by reading a short statement from Mr. Scaramelli, who was not able to be here. This is a short version of the written testimony that they are submitting. My name is Al Scaramelli, and I'm a managing director at Beacon Capital Partners. Alan Levenhall, the CEO of Beacon Capital Partners, has served on the Boston Green Ribbon Commission since its launch in 2010. I am pleased to speak in favor of the amendments to the Building Reporting and Disclosure Ordinance proposed by Councilor O'Malley. Beacon Capital Partners has a long history of developing, owning, and managing commercial property in the city of Boston. We completed our first development in Boston, Center Plaza, over 50 years ago, and we now manage over 26 million square feet across multiple national markets. We've been leaders in the commercial real estate sector, advancing the sustainability of our properties. We've been an EPA Energy Star Partner of the Year for 10 consecutive years, and we have been recognized for sustained excellence since 2004. We have LEED certified over 56 million square feet of office properties. The GRC has been a strong supporter of the city's aggressive climate goals, including a 50% reduction in emissions by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2050. Because buildings constitute such a significant percentage of the city's emissions, it will not be possible to achieve these goals without steady reductions in emissions from existing buildings, which this ordinance will mandate. We see this ordinance as a necessary measure that provides a roadmap for building owners and contractors with sufficient time to prepare for energy efficiency and emissions reductions improvements. It provides opportunities for innovation in technology, building materials, and methods that will make Boston a national model. Our analysis of the technical details of the ordinance indicate that it's well aligned with the internal standards of building performance that Beacon Capital Partners aspires to. We're sure there are opportunities to improve the current draft in ways that reduce barriers to owner compliance, and we look forward to working with Councilor O'Malley and the mayor to refine this ordinance and make it a critical tool for building a carbon-free future for Boston. Finally, global leadership to address the climate crisis will be a long journey with many twists and turns, but can only start by taking the first step, and the time for action is now. People follow leaders. This is an opportunity for the city of Boston to be a state, national, and world leader. We believe the proposed regulations are a reasonable starting point. So let's continue to be leaders as we have in the past and move forward with this ordinance. Thank you for the opportunity to share our perspective with the council. Now, having read that from Mr. Scaramelli, I'm going to turn this over to Dennis Carlberg from Boston University. Dennis?
Thank you, John. Chairwoman Edwards, Council President O'Malley, and members of the City Council.
thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. For the record, my name is Dennis Carlberg. I'm the Associate Vice President for Sustainability at Boston University, and I co-chair the Green Ribbon Commission's Higher Ed Working Group. On behalf of Boston University, I'd like to thank Council President O'Malley for introducing this amendment to the Building Energy Reporting and Disclosure Ordinance. I would also like to thank Mayor Janey and Chief of Environment, Energy, and Open Space, Reverend White Hammond, for their leadership and continued support of this important work. To address climate change, Boston University's Board of Trustees approved an ambitious climate action plan in 2017 to achieve net zero direct emissions for our operations by 2040. This is 10 years ahead of the city's goal because we feel it is important to lead, along with other organizations and institutions, if the city is going to have a chance of meeting its goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. We strongly support this goal, and we strongly support the emissions performance standard. Boston University's Institute for Sustainable Energy led the research and development of carbon-free Boston. We know from this work that the building sector is by far the most important to decarbonize by 2050. And the emissions performance standard is the mechanism that will enable the city to meet this goal. Climate change is not about the environment. It is about people, our health, and our prosperity. This is especially true for environmental justice communities, which are disproportionately affected by the impacts from climate change. As we see in the news every day, the changing climate is already having an impact. The good news is that we have the technology and we have the solutions to minimize future impacts if we act now. The emissions performance standard is the key that Boston has to unlock these strategies and technologies for change. I'd like to thank Allison Brizius and the Environment Department and the community stakeholders and subject matter experts that have been involved with the development of the emissions performance standard. That said, there is work to be done to refine some of the details. We support the formation of working groups and the continuation of the public process to make these refinements in the coming weeks. We need to act quickly, and I'm here to help to the extent I'm invited. So I'm happy to participate moving forward. Thank you. Now I'll turn this over to my colleague, Carol Wedge, the president of and CEO of Shepley Bulfinch. Thank you.
Excuse me, Carol, you need to unmute.
It keeps remuting me. Okay, there we go. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chairwoman and Congressman O'Malley and City Council for allowing us to speak on this. I second, third, or many times over support all the comments that have been made today. We need the guidance of BERDO to achieve the carbon-free Boston goals. I'm speaking as a member of the Green Ribbon Commission, but representing architecture and engineering. And the thing I would share is that we have the talent in Boston and the design firms and the engineering and construction firms to help the city get there. We've been offering case studies and engage very directly with the city to understand what the implications are for our clients and for building owners. We primarily work in healthcare and education and urban development projects, and the changes that have been made or evolution of BERDO to include a portfolio of buildings has been very important to those clients. The other thing I'm excited to see is the investment fund, because we know that not everyone can afford this in a traditional way. And so we have to help people with that kind of funding that will help support them in addition to the knowledge and talent. Architects have known for decades that they must address the climate impact of buildings, and we're very supportive of BERDO, and we're here to help the city in this process. Thank you very much. And I'm going to introduce Norm Lamond, the Sustainability Manager of Turner Construction. Norm?
Yep, here we are. Great. Chairwoman Edwards, Chief White Hammond, Council President O'Malley, and members of the City Council, thank you for the opportunity to appear before this group today. First, I'd like to thank the City Council, the previous administration, as well as the current work of Mayor Janey's office and her staff, including Dr. Allison Brizius and others, in addressing the concerns of climate change by targeting the reduction of carbon emissions, Councilor O'Malley is to be commended for introducing this amendment to BERDO for its consideration. For the record, my name is Norman Lamond with Turner Construction Company. My role at Turner is Senior Project and Sustainability Manager based in our Boston office and hold a seat on our National Sustainability Committee. In addition, I was a founding member of the Massachusetts chapter of the United States Green Building Council and currently a co-chair of the ULI Resiliency Committee here in Boston. Today, Turner Construction is a national construction company with more than 40 offices in the US and also perform work in Canada as well as other countries. And would like to point out that Turner has been performing work in Boston area since 1909. For more than 20 years, Turner has integrated sustainability into our operations, initially through our work for clients seeking to achieve sustainable building certifications for their building projects. More recently, we are working to do our part as a company by establishing a 2030 goal. Through this goal, our company endeavors to reduce carbon emissions and water usage on our job sites and offices by 50% by 2030. As an organization, we now have 6 full-time sustainability staff under the leadership of our Vice President and Director of Sustainability. Turner's been part of the Green Ribbon Commission board for 10 years, represented by our Regional Vice President, Pete Hamill, and have actively participated in numerous working sessions and advisory groups convened by the GRC. Turner has also been a member of the ABC for many years, assisting in their work to promote and integrate sustainability within the business community. The work of the Green Ribbon Commission, ABC, and others has been crucial to get us where we are today and keep us engaged as a community. BERDO is a critical next step and a reasonable measure in working to reduce carbon emissions as the City of Boston works to attain its goal of 50% carbon reductions by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2050. On the business front, many technologies, strategies are being developed and brought to market that track, measure, and contribute to the reduction of carbon emissions. The integration of these technologies and strategies are also expected to create jobs for the local community. So the work that it will take to incorporate carbon reduction strategies into the buildings and homes of Boston. Over the past several years, we've seen increasing requests for proposals for projects seeking higher energy efficiency targets, and more recently, projects aspiring to be net zero with more resilient features. We at Turner are engaged in this effort to learn as much as we can from the experts working to address the impacts of climate change so that we can bring the best advice and support to our clients, design team members in the planning, delivery, and operations of the buildings we construct. Moving forward, new buildings should certainly seek the highest energy efficiency, but as a community, we cannot lose sight of the need to improve the efficiencies of our existing building stock. We see that BERDO is trying to do just that and support the advancement towards its adoption. Of course, there may be opportunities to improve the current language of BERDO, and we look forward to, if asked, to engage in the continuing conversations that would be necessary to do that. In closing, we would like to thank the leaders of the City of Boston, the GRC, ABC, and their consultants, as they've all worked very hard to address this issue. I would also like to mention there's been many professional organizations and the vibrant community organizations of the City of Boston that have engaged to address the concerns for our environment, our city, its people, and our future. There's more work to do, so let's remain positive and carry on together. Thank you.
So Winston, you're up next.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you. My name is Winston Vaughn. I'm the Massachusetts Director of Climate Solutions for Healthcare Without Harm, an international advocacy organization that works to advance sustainability, equity, and resilience in the healthcare sector. Along with my colleague, Eugenia Gibbons, we serve as the co-coordinators of the Boston Green Ribbon Commission Healthcare Working Group, which is made up of the world-class healthcare institutions that call our city home. I'm here today to speak in favor of the amendments to the Building Energy Reporting and Disclosure Ordinance that have been introduced by Council President O'Malley. The prosperity of our city is inextricably linked to the health of its residents, which in turn is inextricably linked to the health of our city's environment. The heat waves, extreme storms, flooding, and wildfires that have dominated the news in recent days and weeks have again shown us that there is no greater threat to the future of our city and to the health and safety of its residents than the climate crisis. Our healthcare institution's core mission is to heal. Now, to pursue that healing mission in the context of a rapidly changing global climate means taking bold action to reduce healthcare's contributions to the climate crisis. It also means recognizing that we must begin to prepare for the impacts that we are too late to prevent. re-envisioning our healthcare institutions as anchors of resilient, sustainable, and healthy communities. Boston's healthcare leaders have long recognized that fact and have begun to take action. A report we released a few weeks ago on behalf of the Green Ribbon Commission Healthcare Working Group shows that the Metro Boston healthcare sector has actually reduced their emissions by 18% between 2011 and 2018, despite growing its building footprint by 10% and serving more and more acute patients. That full report can be found at the Boston Green Ribbon Commission website if anybody wants to look at the details. These impressive gains were driven by a number of factors that we don't have time to cover here. But the biggest impact came from Mass General Brigham and Boston Medical Center's shift to renewable and zero carbon electricity. If the whole healthcare sector in Boston were to transition to 100% renewable electricity, it would reduce healthcare's emissions by 38%, most of the way to achieving the city's goal of 50% reduction by 2030, which would be codified by these amendments. The report also identifies a number of challenges to fully decarbonizing hospital buildings beyond that 2030 target, so by the 2050 goal. Hospitals are, of course, incredibly energy-intensive facilities that operate, as others have mentioned here, 24/7, 365, and must continue to operate even during the natural disasters driven by the climate crisis. Decarbonizing healthcare facilities, including the district steam systems and CHP systems that ensure continuous operations, can and must be achieved. But we must do so in a way that actually makes those facilities, as well as the communities that they serve, more climate resilient and more resilient to the challenges ahead. This is no easy task, but it is a necessary one, and one that, if we do it right, will actually build a more sustainable, equitable, and resilient Boston that can serve as an example to the rest of the world. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. That's everyone, John? Or did you have
Yep, that's it, Councillor.
Terrific. Well, again, thank you all, particularly John Cleveland, who's been doing this incredibly important work for a little glory and even less pay, but he's doing it because he believes so strongly that we need to do this, and we need to have an approach of working together, finding ways to effective solutions, which is evident in this ordinance. To answer a question, I think Norman Dennis and perhaps others had, Carol may have asked about the desire to continue to work in the weeks ahead. If asked, you are all asked, and you are all being dragooned into continued service in this. And I appreciate talking about the weeks ahead, not the months ahead, because it is vital that we will obviously, have a working session after this, but it's vital that we get this done in relatively short order. But of course, we want your continued partnership and works, and we appreciate all your work done thus far. Again, I want to defer my questions to my colleagues. So first up will be Councillor Mejia, then Councillor Braden. And if Councillor may have stopped by, if Councillor Mejia needs a moment, we'll start with you, Councillor Braden, and then go to Councillor Mejia. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Malley. I'm really pleased to hear from all of the panelists this afternoon. I'm just curious about and encouraged by the commitment to cross-collaboration and teamwork, because we're all in this boat together, and the only way we're going to make any progress is if we all work together, so thank you. And just in terms of implementation and buy-in, I'd love, and maybe this may be directed more towards the gentleman from Turner. How do we motivate our other developers and members of our real estate community to really get on board and appreciate that this is such an extremely important and urgent issue? How do we get them all in on this?
Well, great question. I think it's what I've learned through the process is really that it's a conversation, and sometimes the conversations go quick. Sometimes it just takes time. We've been totally encouraged by the work that GRC has done to convene these types of conversations, as well as the ABC, and the community engagement in the community organizations has just been wonderful to get all of the perspectives that have been brought to bear on this topic. So I think we just need to continue on with that.
Very good. And in terms of implementing, is there anything more that the city can be doing to motivate participation in terms of zoning requirements and energy, just really there's a carrot and the stick issue in terms of subsidies or encouragement for greater participation. We're looking at all the tools in the kit here?
Sure. I'm not sure if was that directed for me? Sorry.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. You're the person from the development community. That might be the best person.
Yeah, well, we as a company are not developers per se, but there's one segment that hasn't really been talked about right now, but I think that it's worth considering and thanking. The higher institutions that we have here in Boston have just been excellent in engaging in advancements of technologies and working to learn as much as they can about these global issues and trying to integrate that into the classroom. Our future are in these classrooms and they're in these labs. And I think the more that we recognize the fact that there's a lot of economy that can be grown in the advancement of these technologies, we're all in this together. And I think that's one area that I've been encouraged to see and look forward to seeing it evolve further. So that would be one area, is our local higher institutions.
Very good. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Councillor, if I could add just one thing in, I think we're really excited, as John Cleveland again, we're really excited by Chief White-Hammond's approach on figuring out how we can trade best practice and learning across these sectors. And we have these sector working groups, and we bring players together across the sectors. And I think there will be an incredible opportunity to trade best practice across the organizations and really accelerate this in the marketplace. And we really look forward to partnering with the city on that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that this is a team effort, and thank you all for your leadership and in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Councillor Mejia?
Yeah, so sorry. I was on mute, and by the time you were too quick for me, O'Malley. I'm really encouraged, as Councillor Braden mentioned, about this whole idea of everyone kind of leaning into this conversation. And I agree that Chief Hammond, not just her dedication to this conversation, but just also knowing her as a skilled organizer and really understanding the importance of voice and the evolution of how we're all learning, right? And so I'm curious to that point, as we continue to have this conversation and lay down the foundation to set ourselves up for success, if there are ways for us to kind of like explore, Councillor O'Malley, for us to have some quarterly check-ins, very similar to how we do with the Boston Jobs Residency. Like, is there some infrastructure for us to consider so that we can set ourselves up for success, and that everyone is helping to inform what the accountability measures could look like, and also what type of support service will folks need to be able to achieve these goals. So just whoever wants to chime in on that, I would love some insight.
Well, I may tackle it, and then if the chief wants to add, or any members of the panel, it's a great idea, Councillor Mejia. I would say a couple of things. One is, once this passed, part of it is enabling an advisory committee, which will be 2/3 community-led, or the makeup will be 2/3, and allowing for, perhaps, my advice would be, as someone who will be a former councillor come January, is perhaps do a hearing order early on a check-in on implementation of BERDO 2.0, and then that would allow sort of the formal setting where you would bring the chief, Dr. Breezius, presumably members of the board, to sort of come in and sort of give updates. There are other reportings that will be, of course, made available publicly to allow the 5-year goals being met and what steps need to be taken. But I think there's an opportunity, and I think what's really unique about this, and in 11 years, I've never had just total cooperation between the executive and the legislative branches of government, is just, we all want this to succeed, and we all want to do this right. So I think that there's a great opportunity to allow for, much like the Green Ribbon Commission has operated in a very transparent and open manner, have whomever chairs the Environment Committee next year to convene quarterly council briefings with the chief and with folks who serve on the board, and open it up to members of the public, and obviously open up out to those who come into that universe of buildings that we need to work to get to decarbonization, to allow for some good, honest Q&A and updates. I think it's a really, really great issue to continue. And as a private citizen, I will be happy to be as involved as the council would want me to next year. So I think it's an exciting idea. I don't know if anyone else wanted to sort of jump on that or add to that.
No, just to say, Councilor O'Malley, our intention is to have the same kind of openness that we tried to in developing this, that we tried to in the way this is coming forward. I think sometimes we might hear people concerned because they are thinking about what they just have to do personally. But the reality is that climate change means we're all in the same boat together. And that boat could sink if we don't work together. So I think what's exciting is that over this pandemic, not perfectly, but in many ways, we have seen with sharp focus what it means to be all in on something together and to face our peril together and to figure out what steps we need to take. And so I think both with the review board and the work that our office will continue to do, we've talked about the possibility of creating a resource hub and other sets of things. We want all of our buildings to be looked at together and people be in it together. And we think that's a real possibility. And I think that's the only way we have any chance of combating climate change. So I hope that even those who are concerned will get clear. This office is not here to castigate you for having a big building. We really want to work together. And I think we can do it. We are Boston. We can do it. We're looking forward to it.
Well said. Thank you, Chief. Any further questions, Councilor Mejia? And I don't believe Councilor Bach has joined us, so I will conclude this panel. Oh, I see the chair is back. So, Madam Chair, we just got through questions for the institution panel, the GRC panel. So I'm happy to give you back the virtual gavel, and I know we're up for advocates next.
Yes, we are. And thank you so much for chairing while I had to step away. For the advocates panel, we have Darlene Lombos, Executive Secretary Treasurer of the Greater Boston Labor Council, Andy Wells-Bean, Campaign Coordinator for BCAN, Dwayne Tyndall, Executive Director of ACE, and Leanne Canty of Mothers Out Front. We'll start with Darlene.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to everyone here this evening. Again, my name is Darlene Lombos, and I'm the Executive Secretary Treasurer of the Greater Boston Labor Council. Thank you again for having this hearing and giving me the opportunity to speak enthusiastically in favor of BERDO. We represent at the council 100,000 working class families in the Boston region and began working on this legislation with the Walsh administration, ensuring that it's the highest environmental, worker, and racial justice standards. What we call at the Green Justice Coalition, the triple win framework that centers climate policies on what's most beneficial and just for people of color, workers, and the environment simultaneously. We are honored to continue this work with the Janey administration through Chief Mariama White-Hammond and all the city councilors here today to bring this important legislation over the finish line. We are glad to see that the current language includes a board to oversee funds, and we strongly agree that community-based organizations should be empowered to name members to that board. We request that the Green Justice Coalition, anchored by groups like Alternatives for Community Environment, as well as the Greater Boston Labor Council, be named in the ordinance as specific organizations that will be asked to nominate members for the board with guaranteed seats. We believe that with community and labor oversight on the review board, we can ensure a high level of equity and enact the spirit of this legislation. We are happy to discuss this more as changes are made to the final language. And thank you for your time today and considering this.
Thank you very much, Darlene. Andy Wells-Bean.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Andy Wells-Bean. I serve as the campaign coordinator for Boston Climate Action Network, or BCAN. BCAN's mission is to build community power for climate justice As many of you know by now, climate change is an emergency and it is at our doorstep. Vulnerable communities are at real and increasing risk. Now, Boston is making strides towards adaptation, but we must do everything in our power to stop making the problem worse. That is why Boston has a carbon neutrality goal. And every one of us has a responsibility to be part of the solution. Now, personally, I cannot count the number of carbon footprint calculators, go green listicles, and even TV commercials that I've seen, all urging me to cut my own climate emissions. And I know BCAN's members and supporters do work at that. But it is clear where the biggest issue is. In Boston, 71% of the city's total carbon emissions come from buildings. Learning that surprised me, but what I found truly astonishing was that fewer than 3% of those buildings were responsible for about half the whole city's carbon footprint. To meet our climate goals, those who are emitting the most must be doing the most. BCAN has brought this issue to neighborhood civic associations, to student groups, and on the street to many hundreds of people more. There is broad consensus that the parties contributing the most to Boston's climate pollution should be doing everything they can. In Boston, that responsibility falls to the owners of big buildings. So to achieve the city's carbon reduction goals, we must insist that the standards be set high. We are already behind. Offsets are not an option. Money should stay in town rather than being sent out of state. The review board should be made up entirely of community stakeholders. Let's avoid conflicts of interest and putting foxes in charge of the hen house. That adequate resources are given to the Environment Department to implement the ordinance, and that enforcement is strict. Thank you so much for allowing me to testify. Let's get this done.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dwayne Tyndall from ACE.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing today? So thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Dwayne Tyndall, and I'm the Executive Director of Alternatives for Community and Environment in Roxbury, Mass. ACE builds the power of communities of color to combat environmental racism and classism, to build healthy and sustainable communities and achieve environmental justice. Since our founding in 1994, ACE members and staff have been at the forefront of the fight for environmental justice in Massachusetts. Updating BERDO is a priority for ACE because reducing building emissions in the places where we live and work will reduce asthma and other chronic illnesses in our communities. Lower energy bills and improve heating and cooling. It is past time for bold action grounded in environmental justice that centers communities on the front lines of gentrification and the climate crisis. The process to update BERDO represents a new model of democratic policy development. Frontline communities support BERDO because, from the very beginning, the policy was developed in collaboration with the community. Over a period of 18 months, ACE and our partners at Right to the City Boston, New England United for Justice, the Chinese Progressive Association, and City Life Vida Urbana held 4 citywide meetings. At these meetings, the city residents came out and met with representatives from the city and engaged in robust discussion about the policy design. The city incorporated the community feedback into the ordinance. Through this process, we made sure that the new building emissions performance standard would improve quality of life and reduce energy bills, making housing safer and more affordable without contributing to gentrification. We are proud of the fact that the policy also established a new a necessary model of democratic policy implementation, creating an oversight board with 2/3 of the seats held by members of frontline communities. Community oversight is necessary for real accountability. It is time that communities most burdened by pollution and environmental racism play a central role in implementing policies grounded in environmental justice. Also, the budget that reflect the level of enforcement and the review board. This will take resources, and we expect that a budget line will be reflective of what will be needed to execute said policy. ACE and our community partners fought to ensure that policy does not include offsets as a compliance option, because offsets don't fit with our community vision for a just transition to net zero emissions. It's been proven time and again that offsets do little to reduce emissions. Most importantly, they do not improve air quality in frontline communities. Offsets would create the illusion that Boston is doing something about climate change without any benefit to the communities most impacted by the climate crisis. More than any ordinance this council has passed, BERDO 2.0 is informed by the lived experience of communities most impacted by pollution and climate crisis. The residents of Boston frontline communities support BERDO 2.0, and its passage will make Boston a leader in environmental justice and democratic policymaking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Leanne Conti.
Hello, and thank you to the council for inviting me to speak today in support of BERDO 2.0. My name is Leanne Canty, and I'm a volunteer with the Jamaica Plain chapter of Mothers Out Front. I'm here representing the 4 Boston chapters of Mothers Out Front. Mothers Out Front is an organization of mothers and other caregivers who are dedicated to environmental justice and combating climate change. Our goal is a healthy and livable climate for all the world's children. I myself am the mother of a 21-year-old son, Ashwin, and a 17-year-old daughter, Priya. I also work as a primary care physician. As a mother, from the beginning, your whole being is oriented towards keeping your children safe. Cutting food into little pieces, child-proofing your living space, buckling them into car seats, and holding their hands when they cross the street when they're young. When they're older, talking about substance use and safe relationships, and always trying your best to set a good example. It's the never-ending object of a parent to keep your child safe. But as individual parents, we're very limited in what we can do to protect our children from the harms of the climate crisis. We don't need to look long or far to see the dangers that our children will confront. Apocalyptic forest fires, historic drought in the West, more frequent and severe coastal storms, flooding, and sadly much more. As you and the council have already officially recognized in January 2020, the climate crisis is indeed a health emergency. Just as I try to keep my children safe from harm, as a physician, so do I try to keep my patients safe. Ask any of them, I'm sure they'll tell you how unrelenting I can be in the pursuit of quitting smoking, healthier eating, engaging in exercise. However, just like with my kids, I can't keep my vulnerable patients with asthma and emphysema safe from the deleterious effects of rising temperatures, living in heat islands, the damage from increased environmental concentrations of methane in the air, and more. The BERDO 2.0 update is a strong policy because it helps us cut carbon emissions and improve air quality. It can also address some of the health inequities that are exacerbated by climate change. The BERDO update creates a fund from alternative compliance payments, which can be used to retrofit homes in EJ communities, providing energy efficient improvements and other retrofits which can improve air quality and protect people from heat exposure and poor quality air. In order to keep our children safe from the devastating effects of climate change, we need much more than the efforts of individual parents. We need bold and effective action on the part of our elected leaders. Similarly, for my patients to remain healthy, their and my actions are not enough. We need to enact new policies. That's why we at Mothers Out Front are here to support the BERDO 2.0 ordinance as introduced, with an oversight board that has representation from the community, funding for EJ communities, and investment in local green energy projects and jobs. BERDO will not only help us meet our important climate reduction targets, it will help the city make improvements in air quality and health equity. We can do it. For the health and well-being of our children, we must do it. And thank you so much to the council for bringing this issue forward, particularly to Councilor O'Malley and to Councilor Edwards. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you I think this was our final panel before we're going to go to, we'll do a round of counselors if they have any questions for this panel. Then we're going to go to public testimony for the rest of this hearing. Is that your understanding, Councilor O'Malley? Is that fine?
That's correct. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
I will, in terms of our counselors that may still be here, Councilor O'Malley, go ahead and kick it off if you have any questions or thoughts,
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if we lost Darlene, but I guess, Dwayne or Andy or Dr. Canty, you can jump in on this. But I wanted to really focus on the jobs aspect and what this means, what this means for the green economy, what this means for potential partnerships with great Boston schools like Madison Park Vocational Vocational Technical High School. So if anyone wants to sort of jump in on what the job piece looks like, because I think that is such a crucial piece to why this is important.
I'll take a shot at this. During the President Obama's first term, it was this term called the green economy. And when I was working for workforce development, we missed that opportunity for various reasons. I think with the resources applied with the different partners, Madison Park, Roxbury Community College, our other workforce development partners, our friends in labor, we could start developing a more comprehensive thinking about what does a green economy look like. And I think that this is an opportunity and maybe a foundation to start having this conversation. The issue always been, it was multi-systems. So systems don't communicate as fluidly as we should. But if we are intentional, we could develop some, the framework of moving forward relative to the green economy. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. Andy, Leanne, did you guys want to jump in as well on that or other thoughts?
Sure. I would just mention that this is a great reason to ensure that offsets are not an option and that any money that's paid to comply with the program is put into that equitable investment fund, which can be spent locally to do the job training necessary and to reinvest in our community.
Thank you for that. Well, I just wanted to close again because we still have quite a few folks from the public who I'm looking forward to hearing from. But for the three of you and Darlene and Abstentia, you've been tremendous partners through this work, and I'm just incredibly grateful. It obviously will continue in the weeks ahead, but I really appreciate the passion and the drive and the commitment. This is among the biggest issues facing us as a city, as a planet. And we can do this right. We can do it quickly. Well, we should be doing it quickly, but my point being that this has been a long process to get us to this point. And I know that we will be a national and I believe an international leader on how we're going to do this. So I'm just grateful for all of your work. And that's all I have for this round of questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I just been checking to see my colleagues who are left. Councillor Flynn, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Mejia.
I don't have any specific questions. I am still listening in. I am here. I'm excited to hear the additional public testimony, but at this point, all of my questions have been answered, and I feel good in the direction that we're moving in. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor, I think Asabi George had to leave. Counselor Wu, I think, stepped off. Yeah. Counselor Braden she may be going, but I don't think she had any more questions. Counselor Bach, I think she may have. As for me, I've been quite amazed and excited about the collaboration I'm hearing from everyone. And I'm excited to get to the public testimony, which we have at least 40 people signed up. So why don't we get to that then? Let's see. Yep, here we go. Okay, so I have first, I'm gonna just name 3 people for folks who are speaking in English and do not need interpretation services. We're really gonna ask you to stick to 2 minutes. So that we can get through people if there's, get through the whole list of people and hopefully before, 7 p.m. finish. So Andrea Atkins, Maxine Hunter, Ben Hillerstein, State Director, Environment, Massachusetts Research and Policy Center. When you do speak, please say your name and your affiliation, if you're with an organization or not, and then you have 2 minutes. All right, so we'll start with Andrea Atkins, my apologies.
Hi, this is Andrea Atkinson. I'm the co-executive director of One Square World, a nonprofit here in Boston. I'm also a resident of Boston, and I'm also one of the consultants who worked on the design for the community-centered resident engagement process to build this policy. We worked with deep partnership from Alt4 Community Environment and Chinese Progressive Association, as well as other community groups. And our approach is really to identify and work with the stakeholders who would be most significantly affected by the reduction of building fossil fuel emissions in Boston. In this case, the most impacted were the residents and abutters of large buildings in Boston, primarily in Chinatown and Brighton. Current impacts to residents, as you heard, include respiratory and cardiovascular health issues such as asthma, exacerbated by on-site fossil fuel and co-pollutant emissions. The design of the process is democratic, ensuring that those most impacted and those that have most expertise with the repercussions of building emissions, and who happen to also be historically and routinely left out of decision-making, were collaborators in designing this policy as part of the engagement process. The process intertwined the lived experience of residents with technical expertise, building expertise, ensuring that each group had the information needed to understand the other. As Reverend Hammond mentioned, the review board will continue this commitment to deep democracy, ensuring that the folks that have the most lived experience are at the decision-making table. We hope that the technical experts can keep up with them. We've seen boards of this type in Providence, Rhode Island, Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon, with excellent results. In Providence, Rhode Island, for example, the Racial and Environmental Justice Committee, the board that this was actually modeled on, passed one of the most progressive climate justice policies in the nation, their climate justice plan. This policy provides an opportunity for Boston to continue to be a leader in addressing climate change, and we firmly believe that this way of doing policy, by putting public back in public policy, will have similar impacts here in Boston. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maxine Hunter.
Hello. I'm Maxine Hunter, and I am a volunteer with Mothers Out Front in West Roxbury, one of the 4 Boston chapters of Mothers Out Front. Right now, I'm feeling very proud to be living in a city where all of our counselors have shown that they care about our health and they care about the climate future that our children will inherit by passing and supporting this updated ordinance. So this ordinance must be passed in the form that it was filed. It must include community oversight on the review board, and any local offsets will ensure local jobs. And finally, any fees that are collected must be used to benefit environmental justice communities. So thank you, everybody, for your great work. Can't wait to see this get over the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben Hillerstein.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Councilor Edwards and members of the committee for the opportunity to offer our testimony today. My name is Ben Hellerstein, and I'm the State Director for Environment Massachusetts. We're a statewide citizen-supported environmental advocacy organization working to protect clean air, clean water, and open spaces together with our thousands of citizen members and supporters. And I'm here today to speak in support of the proposed updates to BERDO to establish energy performance standards for existing large buildings. I want to say it's very exciting to see this move forward, and I commend Chief White-Hammond and the Janey administration for bringing forward this proposal and the council for your longstanding advocacy on this issue. I remember the stakeholder meetings that Councilor O'Malley convened several years ago to start hashing out the pathway to zero emission buildings, and it's exciting to see those efforts continue to bear fruit today. I'm going to keep my remarks brief and say that this is a good idea and a necessary one. And it fills a gap in current strategies at the local and state level to reduce carbon emissions from buildings. At the state level, we're beginning to take steps towards carbon-free new buildings with the net zero stretch code that was passed into law in March. This code may not go far enough to ensure that all of our new buildings are fossil fuel free, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. And for existing buildings, there are longstanding voluntary programs for energy efficiency like Mass Save, and the city has done a lot of work to encourage residents and businesses to participate in those programs. But voluntary is not enough. We need to set clear expectations for large buildings and require building owners to meet those expectations over time. And that's what an energy performance standard would accomplish. On Beacon Hill, Environment Massachusetts and several other organizations are advocating for statewide legislation to establish energy performance standards for large buildings. The bill is called the Better Buildings Act, filed by Representative Maria Robinson and Senator Rebecca Rausch, and we're hopeful that we'll see this legislation move forward this session. But even with a proposal active on the state level, there's still a need for local leadership on this issue. We've seen time and time again that action at the municipal level on climate change and clean energy can push state leaders to act and can show what is possible to happen statewide. And leading communities like Boston with a strong commitment to climate action can and should go further than any standards established at the state level. So to conclude, I encourage you to move ahead with this proposal, and I hope that we will see this idea replicated in other communities and ultimately on the state level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers are Paulina Casasola Mena, Gabby McFrain, and Martin Roeder.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. Hello, everyone. My name is Paulina Casasola, and I work as a climate justice organizer at Clean Water Action. Clean Water Action works on strong health and environmental protections by bringing issue expertise, solution-oriented thinking, and people power to the table. We also support the Green Justice Coalition, and today I want to thank the Council for the opportunity to speak and for prioritizing cutting carbon emissions through the new building performance standards. I want to mention that we appreciate that offsets are not part of the program since they create significant loopholes, and also want to highlight that as we recover from the pandemic, we need to prioritize the needs of environmental justice in historically underserved communities. Our communities of color, which are the ones that struggle the most with air pollution and now with COVID-19, need to see the benefits of the new building emissions performance standards and need to see local pollution reduction. In addition, I'm asking the council and the mayor to help create high road green jobs for our BIPOC communities and to better support those who have been historically overburdened by environmental pollution. And again, thank you so much for prioritizing reducing emissions in the cities through the new performance standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Gabby McFrain.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Gabby McFrain. I have a 3-year-old son named Ronan. I'm also a volunteer with Mothers Out Front Jamaica Plain. I wanted to thank the council for their unanimous support of the BERDO update. I want my kid to grow up in a society that cares for its most vulnerable, and prioritizing reducing fossil fuel usage and preventing climate change is the most important way we can do that today. The BERDO update is a vital part of the Boston Climate Action Plan, and we must pass it as is with community oversight on the review board and funding for environmental justice communities. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Martin Roeder.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and members of the City Council for the opportunity to testify. I'm a resident of the Back Bay and an active member of the Neighborhood Association of the Back Bay, and have been involved in a number of ongoing community reviews of major development projects. And it's those experiences which I'd like to bring to your attention, because to me, they indicate that the current Article 80 review process is completely inadequate for the purpose of dealing with the threats that we face, given what is going on with climate change. I'll give a couple of specific examples of what is going on right now for buildings that will inevitably be completed later in the decade of the 2020s and may possibly make the situation worse instead of contributing to the solution. The first of these is at 380 Stewart Street by the Skanska Construction Company. And this is something that was actually originally approved, a building that was originally approved by the BPDA in 2015, at the time when the applicant was the John Hancock Insurance Company, which sold the site to Skanska in December of 2020. Now, Skanska has requested the BPDA, in fact, to allow this building to proceed without further review, claiming that everything that they're doing now is an improvement on the building. And while they graciously agreed to keep us informed of all the investigations that they're doing about how to improve energy efficiency and so forth, of course, we won't have the opportunity, if there is no further review, to in fact comment on this and to try and influence them to do the things that we believe are right to do that will meet the kinds of requirements that BERDO 2 will introduce. We hope that the BPDA will have the will and the common sense to reject this request, but we'll have to wait and see. The other one is a project at 149, 153 Newbury Street, the corner of Newbury Street and Dartmouth Street, what used to be a parking lot. And that's a small project under the current Article 80 review, below 50,000 square feet. We requested, nevertheless, that they give us information on the plans that they're doing to make sure that they maximize energy efficiency and climate resiliency. And they have at least agreed to go all electric. But basically, they refused to give us this information. And then this project was rushed through approval by the PPDA board at its meeting on May the 13th. So the attitude of these two companies, and I'm not saying that all developers are like this, seems basically to be trust, but do not verify. And the point is that we in the community seem to have very little leverage in pushing them to do what we believe is right, given the threats that we face from climate change. So and I think others in NAB and in the neighborhood perceive BERDO 2.2 as being essential in order that we should have some leverage to help convince all developers that they need to do the right thing and not try and get away with possibly giving some concessions, but essentially indulging in greenwashing that will mean that the good intentions expressed in BERDO and in the Commonwealth's new Climate Action Plan will remain to a significant extent good intentions and not realities. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Up next, we have Eve Torrey, Emma Brewer-Wally, David Ward, and Michael McCord.
Hello, my name is Eve Torrey, and I'm the Director of Climate, Energy and Resilience at A Better City, which is a business membership organisation with 130 of Boston's business leaders. We applaud the city's efforts to achieve a carbon neutral economy by 2050 and understand that decarbonising the built environment is an essential step in realising climate targets at both the city and state level. A Better City, or ABC, that has been referenced earlier, was instrumental in gaining business support for BERDO prior to its passage in 2013. Most of our member buildings have reported, disclosed, and complied with the current BERDO ordinance, and we look forward to working closely with City Council and the City's Energy and Environment Department again to move the amendment forward in a solutions-oriented way that is workable for all our communities. Our members would like to continue to work on some aspects of the amendment, further details of which are in written comments, but just as an overview, they want some clarification on the function and tasks of the review board and the city so we can ensure that there's a right combination of experts on the review board, that there is added specificity and transparency to the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund distribution, that there's further clarification on some of the definitions, applications, approvals, and the role of tenants, that we can ensure that bundled RECs from power purchase agreements outside of New England are allowable, and that there's a placeholder to review carbon offsets with an emphasis on removals in the future, because 10% of the city's emissions will need to be addressed with tools like carbon offsets by 2050, and we think we need to start that conversation sooner rather than later. Regarding the process, we'd like clarification on the development and timeline of the regulations and staff capacity in the city's environment department to handle 1,300 additional buildings, and whether the clarifications for those may have City Council reconsider the amendment's implementation timeline. Working to make these clarifications will help large buildings remain in compliance and, most importantly, maximise decarbonisation potential, essential for the safety and health of all of our communities. We look forward to the working sessions to come, and I thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you very much for your wonderful suggestions. I don't know if Emma is on still. I don't see her. So what I'm going to do is go to David Ward.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chair, and also thanks to the Boston City Council and Matt O'Malley for the work on this really important ordinance. For the record, again, my name is David Ward. I'm representing the 350 Mass group. The Boston Node of 350 Mass is one of 18 grassroots nodes across the state. We work locally and statewide on many aspects of climate crisis, including carbon emissions from buildings. 350 Mass played a major role in the passing of the Climate Roadmap Bill in the Massachusetts legislature, and last year has introduced several major climate bills in the current legislative session. We work with Boston Clean Energy Coalition locally and several other coalitions statewide. For my experience, I'm a consulting engineer. I've worked in the building business for 30 years. My work is focused on developing energy efficiency projects in existing buildings. In these years, I've gained a lot of expertise. However, I agree with Chief White-Hammond about the opportunity for everyone to be impactful. Some of my best ideas come from building occupants, the janitors, building operators that work and operate these buildings. So it is something that everybody needs to take part of and can bring something to the table. A few things that I've experienced throughout my career is the things that we need to make this successful, make these buildings more efficient is, first of all, identification of what work needs to be done. Second of all, the motivation, financial incentives, and support to do this work. And third, finding trained people capable of doing the work. This ordinance meets all of those needs. So the 350 Mass group and I personally enthusiastically support the passing of this ordinance. The stated purpose of investing in building a green economy, encouraging the hiring and training of green jobs, protecting public health and promoting equitable access to housing is very commendable, and they are all addressed here. The level and type of effort required by the ordinance only sets a minimum bar that is relatively easy to accomplish with current technologies. But more importantly, it gets building owners on the path to zero emissions. All of these things that are being talked about, reducing carbon footprint, the technology, the knowledge, the skills already exist. So this ordinance just gives the incentives for people to start down that path. The third thing I'd like to point.
Okay, go ahead if you're going to quickly summarize and. Sorry.
I will quickly summarize.
Thank you.
Sorry. The third-party verification reported data enforcement mechanisms are key to establishing the legitimacy and value of the program. Additionally, I want to agree with Mr. Tyndall regarding local jobs training. In order to do this, we need workforce development programs such as the Center for Smart Building Technology that already exists at Roxbury Community College. So with that, I'd like to thank you for the time.
Thank you. Michael McCord.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am a 50-year resident of Boston and a member of several groups involved in promoting green solutions to our present climate emergency. One of those groups is called Back Bay Green, which I'm speaking for this evening. Back Bay Green is in full support of this ordinance, and we hope it passes neither weakened nor slowed down, indeed, perhaps even strengthened and accelerated. We salute Councilor O'Malley for his leadership on this matter and thank the other councilors and members of the city staff and other residents of Boston who have testified today. We appreciate that this ordinance understands what is needed to reach our 2050 targets, that it establishes clear and measurable performance standards, that it provides for an advisory committee and an emissions review board, that it acknowledges environmental justice needs to be front and center, and that it recognizes that the success of the ordinance will depend not just on flexibility and carrots, but also on firm resolve and on penalties if its provisions are deliberately ignored. Today, I also want to speak on behalf of that group of council member children named by Councilor O'Malley, and on behalf of all children in our city. An overriding question before us is this: are we going to be the first generation, perhaps in human history, to step away from the goal of improving the future so that our children can enjoy an even better way of life than we had? Or are we going to show the moral courage and the willingness to take some measure of sacrifice that will be required to confront head-on the existential threat to our planet that is caused by global warming? Our children await our answer to those questions. I hope that a piece of the answer will be delivered to them by the City Council when it passes this critical and historic piece of legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Up next, we have James Michael, Emmanuel, I think, DeBatos, Amy Longsworth, and Elliot Laffer.
Is it me?
James?
Yep. Hi.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards, Matt, everyone. My name is James Michel. I am a proud co-founder of the Boston Clean Energy Coalition. For the past 5 years, almost, our eclectic coalition of 13 grassroots and nonprofit environmental justice organizations has worked in partnership with Councilor O'Malley and others to educate and inform the entire City Council, including our fellow advocates and our fellow citizens, about the crucial importance of reining in emissions from the buildings in Boston, which we all have learned account for over 70% of all greenhouse gas emissions in this city. In addition, a small percentage of our existing buildings are responsible for nearly half of Boston's emissions. They're the big emitters. I'm excited that 4 or 5 years later, everybody knows what net zero means. that we have this dynamic council that has worked very hard to advance attention on how to rein in emissions in the built environment. All the major points have been made, but I'm here to tell you that BCEC unanimously is in favor of these amendments to BERDO 2.0. We appreciate that it will support the emerging green economy. We appreciate that it applies an equity lens and that it will incorporate citizen oversight. Passing these amendments will be a truly bold step, one which we must take. The climate crisis is upon us. This ordinance will enable the entire city of Boston to take meaningful steps to reduce its emissions. Let's take action. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Emmanuel may have, let's call Emmanuel's name. I don't think he's on anymore. Amy Longsworth? No. Elliot Laffer?
Hi, I'm Elliot Laffer. I'm chair of the Neighborhood Association of the Back Bay, and I'm still on. I want to go back to Chief Whitehammond's opening remarks when she talked about how sea level was really rising and that was real, and tie that into something that someone said to me years ago, that we had clawed this city from the sea and the sea was eager to take it back. And that's what letting emissions be unlimited will lead to. We won't have the city that we have. We'll go back to that little peninsula that you find on maps, and we lose the Back Bay, where I live, and we lose East Boston, and we lose a good chunk of Chinatown and a huge chunk of the South End and South Boston. None of that's acceptable. And so this kind of program, and BERDO 2.0 is really, really important to get at that. Qualifying that, there are two thoughts that I had. One is that oftentimes the purpose part of the legislation looks really inspiring, and then people go really hard to work at details to somehow make it easier on them than on everybody else. And I hope that as you folks are finishing up the legislation and the regulations are put in place, that those details are watched really carefully, and that it isn't people saying, oh, just this little tweak. Don't worry about this little tweak. Those little tweaks are often where we get harmed in lots of well-meaning legislation and rules. And you know, I live in actually one of those buildings that will now be covered. It's one of the buildings that's bigger than 20,000 and smaller than 50,000 square feet. That's going to cost us money to fix things, and it should, because we're part of the problem. We need to be part of the solution. I want to go back for a moment to one of the things that Martin Roeder raised earlier. There's a gap in here of buildings that have an existing approval that may go back 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 years, because approvals hang around a long time in this town. And they shouldn't be built in such a way that they don't meet what BERDO is trying to accomplish. And if that means that people have to go back and reapprove some part of their approvals, you should put that into the legislation and make them do that. We don't need new big buildings that don't meet the standards that everybody else is trying to get at. There'll just be one more thing to fix later, and it won't get done. So I want to thank you for listening. The time to solve this is now. I don't think I've ever been at a hearing where everybody says, let's go. But that appears to be where we are now. And so let's go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll just say the name. I'm not sure. Sometimes people sign up under different names. Ryan Greiser, Tom McDonald, Isabella Watson, Terry Mason, Violet Lingenfelter. We'll start with you, Ryan.
Hello, this is Ryan Greiser. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I volunteer with the Boston Climate Action Network, and I've lived in Boston for 4 years. As a member of the Boston Climate Action Network, I'm also a part of their Public Education Committee, which is designed to do community outreach to educate the public on what's going on in the city government related to climate policies. And most recently, in my role with the Public Education Committee, I've been meeting with several community groups to let them know that the BERDO amendments are under consideration and that there's opportunities to voice public input. I've met with the Longfellow Area Neighborhood Association, St. Mark's Area Civic Association, and if anyone from those organizations are on the call today, thank you again for allowing us to come and speak with you. I also met with a couple of student organizations at Boston University, MIT, and a group at Old South Church that is involved with climate advocacy. Just real quick, in addition, I've been doing petition collection at community gathering places and had just a ton of conversations with different community members of different ages and political affiliations. And I just wanted to let everyone know that's, considering these BERDO amendments, that what I really have found in having all these conversations is that people really care about the impacts of climate change, and they're supportive of policies that are aimed at addressing emissions. I've had conversations with over 100 people through these different groups that I've met with, and I just want to let the people know that there is broad support for these policies, and people care about climate change, and they want to see the city take action to address emissions. So that's why I'm personally in support of the BERDO amendments. And I just want to sincerely thank everyone that's worked to progress the policy to this point. Thank you so much.
Perfect, thank you. We have Tom McDonald.
Hello. Do you hear me?
Yes, good to go.
My name is Tom McDonald. I'm a longtime resident of Roslindale. I work in a local neighborhood environmental group called Greening Rossi, and am also a member of the Boston Climate Action Network. I've worked for a long time in Boston as English as a second language and literacy educator. I wanted to say first, to repeat any number of people, it's so wonderful that our Boston City Council is so unanimous and forward-thinking. What I wanted to offer is the idea that these buildings, that the big building owners need to take responsibility, and that they should understand that the less educated in Boston are equally expert in the affairs of the city. And so I would like to suggest that the city council, in passing BERDO, create some kind of countdown that would be public, so that all the residents of Boston could be monitoring the big buildings as they reduce their emissions. I think it's a chance for community education. I think it's a chance for people who are less involved in city affairs to become more involved. The public part of it is important. I think the community education part of it is critical. It's wonderful that the city council is so unanimous, and I think your unanimity could be infectious and reach all corners of the city. So thank you.
Thank you very much. On to Isabella Watson, or like it's like Izzy Watson, excuse me, on
Yeah, hello. I'm not sure why. I'm actually logged in on Ricardo's laptop right now because it's on webinar mode for me and a couple other people that are supposed to speak. So I will just do this from this computer. But I will also be reading the statement for Teresa Mason or Terry. I was also asked to read another person's statement. Is that all right?
Is that other person signed up?
Yeah, it's Caroline Cutlip, I believe.
Okay, so
contacted me earlier today.
So just for time's sake, could you do your statement and those two in 3 to 5 minutes, no more?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Hold on, this is difficult. 1 second.
While you're getting set up, we might go, oh, there you are. Okay.
Okay, I am on my computer now. Technological difficulties. Awesome. Okay, so I will start with my statement. Hello, and thank you for this opportunity to speak today. My name is Isabel Watson. I am 19 years old, and I'm a member of the Boston Climate Action Network. I am also a junior at Boston University and a lifelong environmentalist. We all know that Boston is a trendsetter. What we do now, others will follow. This is a fact. I actually took a trip to Connecticut 3 days ago, and on the highway with the windows down, I could feel the air get better as I left the city. As I got further away, I could feel it get lighter, and it was actually easier to breathe. I'm honestly terrified that if BERDO 2.0 doesn't pass as is, the air in Boston will only get harder to breathe. We talk about reducing emissions by 2050, and I want to emphasize that this is not far away at all. In 2050, I will be 48. In the midst of a climate crisis, I will still have so much life ahead of me, life that I will not get to live if the air is not clean and my community is underwater. I beg you all now, on behalf of myself, my friends, my family, and all of your children, start setting the example now. Set the standards high now, improve my air quality now, lessen the impact of these July storms now, allocate resources to implement this ordinance now, pass BERDO 2.0 as it is now. Offsets should not be an option. Thank you so much. And now I will move on to the statement given to me by Teresa Mason. Okay. Terry says, Terry Mason is a resident of Jamaica Plain for about 30 years, and she's also a volunteer with the Boston Climate Action Network. She says, my hair has been on fire about climate change and its threats for 15 years now. The entire Western US is on fire. Siberia is burning. It should be clear to everyone, including all Boston City councilors and the mayor, at this point in the summer of 2021, that climate change is having devastating effects on people, plants, and non-human animals right now. Europe is drowning in floods. We have had the hottest June perhaps ever here in Boston and the wettest July. All of this means we are in an emergency. The council must act like it is an emergency. When your children and grandchildren ask you what you did to try to stop the destruction that threatens the future they will inhabit, you want to have a clear conscience and say, I did everything I had the power to do. We will stand behind you as you stand strong to enact this powerful policy as it is proposed by the city's Environment Office. Thank you. All right, and now on to the last statement I was asked to read. This is Caroline Cutlip. Thank you, councilors, for holding this hearing, and Councilor O'Malley for sponsoring this amendment. Her name is Caroline Cutlip. She grew up in Brookline, and she now lives in Manhattan, where she's a teacher. She says, I am already seeing the impacts of climate change on my students' lives and the lives of their families, many of whom are from low-income communities of color. Temperatures are rising, sea levels are rising, students are experiencing increased rates of asthma. As a teacher, my utmost goal is to pave a safe future full of opportunity for all our young people. We need to work together to make bold choices to preserve the future of our community, especially when the most vulnerable are at the greatest risks. Passing the proposed amendment to BERDO is an important step toward our goal to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, and I urge you to join us in working boldly towards this goal. I look forward to working with you to keep our community safe and vibrant. Thank you for this opportunity to offer testimony. All right, I'm done.
Thank you. So we're going to have Violet Lingenfelter, then Emily Kwong will go. And Emily Kwong, as I understand, will be the last person who is in need of interpretive services. If we want to just do a virtual hand clap, I forgot I think it's Ms. Lowe, who has been doing simultaneous translations this entire time. That's almost, yeah, so hats off. But in order to give her a break, I'm going to put Emily a little right after Violet, so that, and again, if anybody who needs simultaneous interpretation, please ping someone on the team, let us know. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and allow for Ms. Lowe to have her evening. So Violet, then Emily with interpretation, and then Leslie Pond, and then Ricardo Vieira. So Violet. May have gone. Nope. Here. Hello, Violet. Okay. Okay. Let's try Emily Kwong. Emily on. I know Mark Liu, you noted she would need some interpretation. No. All right. Ricardo Vieira.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, how's everyone doing? My name is Ricardo Vieira. I live in Malden, and I am also a Salem State University student. I believe that we as Bostonians are able to make a change in our community and the way the city handles climate change as well. Because we have a voice, and a voice that wants improvement, and a voice that wants to tell the city that the city has to do better. And with that voice and the support of organizations like the Boston Climate Action Network, we can use it to educate people and the population as well about how important climate change really is, and how they as well can help improve the future, not just of our city, but also the planet. That's why I demand action, climate action specifically, because this issue is bigger than us. And if we don't take action, we will not have a future to look forward to. And by taking action right now, we're taking a huge step forward in the right direction and a brighter tomorrow for future generations. That's why I believe that we should take this seriously, and not just us, just people that care about this, but everyone, every single person in the city of Boston should care about this. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak here.
Thank you, Ricardo. Next is, I'll just put again for Emily Kwong. Okay, so we'll go to Aaron Wood.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to keep it brief. My name is Erin Wood. I'm a 5-year resident of Boston and a lifelong resident of Massachusetts. I just care about the earth. I'd like to thank you all for having me and for your support of the proposed amendments to BERDO. As a young member of our Commonwealth, I find myself constantly afraid of the potential consequences of the climate crisis within my lifetime, and recognize that it is crucial for substantial action to be made now. There's a lot of pressure on the individual citizen to do their part in saving the planet, but the work we do hardly matters without direct and meaningful action from our elected officials. This ordinance is just one thing that would help make Boston a better place to live through the reduction of carbon emissions and the creation of environmental justice programs. For this, I wanted to stress my support of this legislation. Thank you for this opportunity and for your valued time.
Thank you. Well, again, if someone, I'll text you, Mark, if about Emily. Leslie Pond, Mark Ferens, Virginia Marcotte, Keely Bombard.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards and councillors.
for this hearing, for all your work on this legislation, and Councillor O'Malley, especially for sponsoring this amendment. I'm Leslie Pond. I'm a Fenway neighborhood resident for over 20 years, and I am speaking in support of this legislation because every day we are seeing the devastation caused by the climate crisis across our country and globally, and we need to take impactful actions with urgency to strengthen protections for the health and well-being of current and future generations and for our planet. Passing the proposed amendment to BERDO is one of those actions. Our city is falling short of its goal to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. I'm super worried about that. Buildings account for 70% of greenhouse gas emissions in Boston, and half of those emissions come from 3% of our buildings. So BERDO will help to significantly reduce Boston's carbon emissions and fund environmental justice projects that benefit low-income communities and communities of color. It is a win all around. So I strongly urge you to pass this amendment as it is proposed and to accelerate climate actions to reach carbon neutrality much sooner than 2050. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Behrens. Virginia Marcotte.
Here I am. Hello. Whoops. Hello. Thank you for letting me speak. And thank you for allowing such a range and number of testimonies. My name's Jenny Marcotte, or Virginia Marcotte, more formally, and I'm a member of Mothers Out Front. I guess you can see on my T-shirt, the JP chapter. And I'm not a mother, but I joined Mothers Out Front because it seems like they do some really good work on the environment. And I'm super concerned about the climate crisis. And it certainly seems that BERDO point 2 or 2.0 is a very positive step towards reducing green carbon emissions in the city of Boston. People have mentioned different aspects of the amendments, but one that I particularly liked when I read over is the fact that it will require an independent expert audit of the different buildings as kind of a baseline, so that the buildings themselves cannot say, "Oh, we're doing it." It will be audited by independent experts. I very much appreciate what the Boston City Council is doing. Certainly, I particularly appreciate what my own beloved city councilor, Matt O'Malley, does. When I was thinking what I might say, this may seem a little gratuitous, but even though I don't have any children, I care about people younger than me, and these days everybody's younger than me, but I particularly care about the enchanting Margot O'Malley. If those of you probably have seen her pictures on Facebook, and we certainly would like her to have a good, healthy future. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, and my best to Keith. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Keely Bombard.
Yeah, hello. Hello, councilors. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for holding this hearing today and listening to what everyone has to say. So my name is Keely Bombard. I am a rising senior at Boston University, and I'm studying environmental analysis and policy. I'm also involved in our environmental student organization, and through them, I got involved in the Boston Climate Action Network. I just wanted to say that from my perspective as a young person right now, it is so incredibly important to pursue amendments like this. If we mean business when it comes to, fighting climate change, and I think that we do, we have to enact policies that require all the stakeholders in the Boston area to take concrete action to get us to our ambitious but necessary climate goals. And while we do that, we have to make sure that we center the voices of marginalized groups who've been dealing with the consequences of climate change in real ways today, not 20 years from now, not 50 years from now, but today. So that is why I want to speak to support this amendment, because I think the community engagement aspect of it will help us to facilitate an equitable transition away from fossil fuels. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Up next, we have Michael Weinstein, Samuel Pierce, Laurie Doyle, Ginger Lawrence, and Loie Hayes. Michael Weinstein, or excuse me, yeah, Michael Weinstein.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Hi. My name is Michael Weinstein. I'm a 50-year resident of Jamaica Plain, and so I really want to thank Councilor O'Malley for his leadership on this issue. I'm also a member of the Boston Climate Action Network, and so I want to support everything that Andy Wells-Beans said about the amendments here. I do want to say that there's an old saying that the Germans have a word for everything. And I think nothing else has to be said about climate change after Chancellor Merkel looked at the flooding that had happened just this month and said, there are no words in German, in the German language, to describe this horrific scene. So not only do I want to support the passing of these amendments in their strongest form, but to make sure that the City Council allocates the resources to make it work, allocates the proper number of people and money to make BERDO 2.0 as strong as it can possibly be. So thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you very much. Samuel Pierce?
Yes, thank you very much. Councilor Edwards, Councilor O'Malley, Councilor Mejia, and all of the people who are actually on the call. I am a member of the Boston Climate Action Network. I am also the founder of the Boston Green Project back in 2018. So this is very special to me that Boston becomes one of the cities to really set the narrative on rescue plan. But in change, we can wait. Boston already had a 2030 plan, and I think we need to expedite things because Massachusetts has a 2040 plan. And so by doing the BERDO initiative, that will actually allow us to now calculate not only which buildings have the worst emissions, but calculate what the strategies would be. I like what Chief Hammond said as far as one building might be able to help save another one based upon the things that we come up with. And I use the analogy of Government Center, how they were able to use Bluetooth technology and a number of other.
Fine, let's find you some supper.
Oh no. Oh no. I'm gonna mute everybody.
Climate action material, newbie in a sense, which would to implement to highlight the fact that this is not new information. We do know that there was redlining. We do know that there's heat maps. And so we need to have, similar to New York, not only a tree canopy plan, the Million Tree Project, but I would like to offer for the first time that the council consider bringing the Billion Oyster Project to Massachusetts. The Billion Oyster Project is something that was put together by Mayor de Blasio and Governor Cuomo that allows islands like Thompson Island in Boston to actually be outdoor classrooms and help with STEM curriculum, teaching students at our Boston public schools. And so this is something that would be funded by the federal government. It already exists. And there are two states that do this. So New York does the Billion Oyster Project, and also North Carolina, who was working with Northeastern and U.S. Congressman Seth Moulton. We also have in your district, Councilor Edwards, I would say Representative Dan Ryan, who had put together an ordinance or a law as far as using oysters to clean up the water. So one thing that we have to understand is that mollusks actually grow naturally in the United States, unlike any other country in the world. We have EPA Superfund sites, similar, including the Neponset River that we're thinking about. And we really need to incorporate the buildings that we see with the technology that we can also implement. And so I really want to support this new ordinance, and that's probably my time at this point. But thank you very much, Councilor, for calling on me.
And thank you very much again for folks. These are great ideas, great conversation. This will be continued. So I really appreciate you guys being very disciplined in your remarks. Lori Doyle.
Yes, I'm Lori Doyle, and I'm a member of the downtown chapter of Mothers Out Front. And I also want to thank the council for their unanimous support of this BERDO update and for recognizing how important this legislation is. As Councilor O'Malley has pointed out, this BERDO addresses the major source of greenhouse gas emissions, and as such will have such a major effect on the total outcome. It gives guidelines and, more importantly, flexibility to achieve the goal. It was so encouraging to see so many representatives from major Boston institutions who've come forward to support this measure. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Ginger Lawrence.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Do I do something? And I guess I could do start video. There I am.
Perfect.
Okay. Sorry about that. I too belong to the downtown team of Mothers Out Front, and I am also testifying in support of BERDO 2.0. I've lived on Beacon Hill since 1967, and I have 5 grandchildren who also live in the Boston area. So that was my motivation for becoming involved with Mothers Out Front. I was made aware of climate change back in the 80s when I was working at the Tufts Center for Environmental Management. And it is very gratifying now to see really concrete proposals to address major sources of greenhouse gas emitting facilities. We can all, as someone said earlier, we can all do our small part, but BERDO 2.0 really represents a major step that will really make a difference if Boston is to try to achieve its climate goals for 2050. So I appreciate the positive feedback that so many people have given today and for the chance to testify. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Louis Hayes.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Thanks, Councilor Edwards, for the opportunity to comment. I'm speaking today on behalf of Green Energy Consumers Alliance. We're a nonprofit based in the city of Boston since 1982. Our mission is to use consumer power to speed the transition to a low carbon future. Green Energy Consumers strongly supports the proposed revisions of BERDO with the following suggestions and emphases. As an organization closely involved with the procurement of Class 1 renewable energy certificates and with the implementation of municipal aggregations across the state, we commend the ordinance for ensuring that emissions from electricity use may be offset only by high-quality local Class 1 RECs, that's renewable energy certificates, minimizing the possibility of greenwashing. Class 1 RECs keep energy dollars circulating in our region, increase clean energy jobs in our region, and reduce the need for constructing costly and polluting fossil-fueled electricity generation units. We suggest that similar language be added regarding RECs acquired through power purchase agreements, permitting only Class 1 RECs to have value for BERDO reporting. While power purchase agreements in dirtier grids may arguably have efficacy as a global climate mitigation, none of the localized benefits of Class 1 RECs can be claimed by RECs generated outside our grid. No local jobs, no cleaner air locally, etc. Also, The relative greenhouse gas reduction value of RECs generated outside New England have been highly debated and could consume an unsustainable portion of the time needed by the Environment Department to administer BERDO. Green Energy Consumers supports the creation of a review board as proposed, with majority of those seats filled by individuals nominated by community-based organizations that serve Boston residents. As commercial tenants of a BERDO-regulated property, we are very familiar with the tenant-landlord split incentive and the potential conflict of interest that building owners and managers might bring to the review board if they were in the majority. Don't mean to be skeptical, just factual. Green Energy Consumers also supports the use of the alternative compliance payments to try to rectify the historic injustices in our built environment. Given that climate change and local air pollution disproportionately harms lower income populations and people of color, that large non-residential buildings and wealthier residents are responsible for most of Boston's historic building emissions, and that people in environmental justice communities pay a higher portion of total income for utilities than wealthier and whiter populations, we believe that this fund is an appropriate use of alternative compliance payments. Although Green Consumers supports the inclusion of flexibility in the plan, we urge that data on the number of buildings making use of alternative compliance mechanisms, including the hardship compliance plans and the ACPs, be made public annually. And finally, the success of this ordinance depends on accurate and robust evaluation, measurement, and verification and enforcement. Boston would be well served by ensuring that enforcement is sufficiently funded, perhaps through the ACP pool. As long-term advocates of energy efficiency, as well as the administrator of several past efficiency and electrification programs in the Boston area, we're confident that BERDO 2.0 is doable and that it will get Boston on track to meeting its climate goals. We urge the council to pass BERDO 2.0 with our suggested changes. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 4 more speakers that are signed up. They are Sophia Owen, Ania Camargo, Lee Matsuda, David Hyman.
Thank you, Counselor. This is Sophia. I'm going to be reading the statement from Emmanuel de Barros, who was on earlier. My name is Emmanuel from Alternatives for Community and Environment, or ACE. We have been an environmental justice and transit-oriented development neighborhood-based nonprofit in Roxbury for over 25 years. I am honored to be part of the first environmental justice nonprofit organization in Massachusetts and have defended the rights of Roxbury and supported EJ communities in Massachusetts. I am here in full support of BERDO 2.0, not only as an ACE staff member, but as a Boston resident impacted by poor air quality. Growing up in Roxbury and Dorchester with asthma, I noticed I was not the only one. In many units around Boston, mostly public housing still uses a gas stove, is not energy efficient, and is not insulated properly. Asthma is a real obstacle that many families face, impacting their way of life. Due to air pollutants and other causes of poor air quality, cancer, asthma, and other harmful diseases are preventable. We need a better policy approach working for and with us. For a better community process, we need more community voices. The process to engage 4 community-based organizations and more than 70 members in developing BERDO 2.0 resulted in a stronger policy that reflects the concerns of the people in the communities most impacted by harmful building emissions. To ensure that the needs of our community members continue to be centered, the Oversight Board, composed of 2/3 community members, is necessary. In the past, the city has not been good at being transparent and accountable. In the last 2 years, I have seen some change. Unfortunately, the pandemic had happened for folks to see what was needed. Now we have interpreters and include more community folks in advisory boards for projects from the Transportation Department and the Office of Environment, Energy, and Open Space. For the process to be more aligned with the community, we need more community members with decision-making power as part of the review board. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sophia. I see a David Noyles from MPREEP. You've raised your hand, and Emily Kwong is also returned. So I will just add you both to the list. Going to Ania Carmago. Ania? I thought I saw her. Okay. Going to Lee Matsuda.
All right, good evening, everyone. Good to see you all. Thanks, Chairwoman Edwards. Thanks to the city councilors that are present, Chief White Hammond and the panelists and all the residents that are watching and providing testimony. My name is Lee Matsuda, the Executive Director of Community Labor United, a resident of Boston and a parent that knows that we can and must take action to create healthy, safe, and thriving communities for all. Community Labor United brings together grassroots organizations and labor unions to run campaigns to stabilize and strengthen working class families and communities of color in Greater Boston. And as a part of this, we convened the Green Justice Coalition. You've heard from some of our partners today, made up of community-based environmental justice organizing and advocacy groups that represent thousands of residents, many who are leaders on this issue and have actively engaged in the process to develop and advance this ordinance. In the past, we've worked on energy efficiency campaigns. We know how important these measures are to confront the climate crisis and create racial, economic, and environmental justice for the residents in our beautiful city here. As others have stated, we're living in really challenging and distressing times right now that further expose the inequities faced by people of color, people from low-income communities, immigrants, and the working class. And to confront this, we got to, take bold action to address the climate crisis, move this ordinance quickly. And as we do so, we have to continue to listen, engage, and take leadership from those that are most dramatically impacted by climate change. I've been impressed with the process that ACE, One Square World, the City of Boston, and others led to engage residents. And through that, I think we've come up with a great ordinance, and we've seen overwhelming support for the measure. On behalf of Community Labor United, I just want to say we strongly support this ordinance and want to emphasize, I think as others have, a few key things that we must have in the ordinance going forward. One, oversight is going to be critical, and as the language currently states, the review board should maintain 2/3 community stakeholders. They are experts. And I think it also must explicitly include nominations by the Greater Boston Labor Council, Green Justice Coalition, and other community organizations. Two, we must keep the benefits of this ordinance local, and that means keeping offsets off the table. We can't allow building owners the opportunity to buy their way out of the responsibility to address the issue of air quality and emissions locally, and we got to invest in community benefits and jobs. And then three, as we've learned from our experience with other ordinances, they're only as good as our ability to implement and enforce them. And as others have spoke to, I think this means the city must allocate adequate resources going forward in order for us to reach our goals, including carbon neutrality, racial equity, and investment in safe, healthy, stable, and thriving communities for all. Thank you so much for the opportunity and for your leadership.
Thank you. David Hyman.
Hi, yep, here I am. So my name is David Hyman. I'm a longtime member of the Sierra Club, especially in the Massachusetts chapter, been there for quite a while. And I'm active on the Energy Committee for the chapter. So I have we do a lot of things with energy and especially with buildings. So can make some comments there. I want to give a lot of thanks to all the city councilors, and especially to my city councilor, Matt O'Malley, who is not just my city councilor, he's headmanning the whole thing. So a real shout out there, and may your recent addition have a wonderful world when she grows up. And I say that in a number of different shades of meaning. So thank you. And also my thanks to Chief White Hammond and all that you and your office are doing. So what I want to focus on, people have talked in general terms. I'll focus on one specific thing and point it out that really need to focus on. And that is the who gets the benefits of energy efficiency, renewable energy, and all of that. It is very straightforward for a homeowner to put energy efficiency in because the value of their property goes up and their utility bills go down. Definitely for a condo holder, it's the same thing for homeowners. And I'm a co-owner in Jamaica Plain Co-Housing, a place that will be under the BERDO aegis when it gets down to 20,000 square feet. So we're all in on it. And we have our incentive of increased property values and diminished bills. A commercial building owner, business, also has that because their value will go up and their business expenses will go down. The one thing that is missing here are landlords and renters. There's a little disconnect between who gets what and where the incentives are. Because a landlord may improve the property, but if the tenants are paying the utilities, he doesn't get something out of it. If the landlord pays the utilities, he may be tempted to drive up the rents. So who gets what is a big question there. It's been a question for a long time. It's been a problem even before BERDO of how do you get landlords to improve their buildings and make them more energy efficient when they aren't the direct beneficiaries in many cases, unlike the homeowners and the commercial building owners. So we need to make sure that disconnect is connected and that we don't get gentrification driving out the tenants.
Yep.
So we got to do that. And that'll take some money.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad to see that an investment fund is under consideration to help on that.
Yeah.
And we'll point out that
we're over our 2-minute time.
Okay. So that I'll just finish up then that the property values will go up and we need to find a way to make that connection when it's landlords and tenants. I want to point that out. Otherwise, it's wide open, and thank you.
Thank you. David Noyles, then Emily Kwong.
Thank you. My name is David Noyles. I am the director of REAP Roxbury Environmental Empowerment Project, the youth program within ACE, Alternative for Community and Environment. But my name is not important. My job is not, well, in this case, ACE is pretty important in this piece, but I'm not here because of that. I'm here because I'm a human being. And it's like many as others stated, also co-sign CPA, ACE, CLU, on everything that we've been saying, and shouts out to the city councilors that's really been pushing this. But I've been around in environmental justice work for 24 years. I've been through Clean Buses for Boston. I've been through the diesel emission reduction ordinance and the start of the original BERDO. And as far as we're concerned, our young people are concerned, is that this is not something that is to say yay about right now and then do what Dero did and not have the impact that it needs to have later on. And so when it comes to BERDO 2.0, I'm trying for them not to need to be a 3.0 or a 4.0, because I'm going to say something that's going to be a little bit against the grain here, but I don't believe this is for our future. I believe this is for our yesterday. This building impact, I know climate justice is sexy and cute and all, and I believe that full extent that this is a real critical issue in our neighborhoods, especially from the people in my neighborhood of Roxbury and Dorchester and Mattapan. But we needed this back when young people were having asthma attacks on their way to school. we needed this a long time ago. And so that now that this is becoming cool now because of climate change, I'm still not forgetting about the Walter Reed Kernans and the Tamika Davises of the world that put asthma, that put their own lives on the line really for the state of how we look at asthma and how we look at diesel emissions or just emissions in general. So as I applaud everything that's going on here today, I just want to remind that while everybody keeps saying the children are the future, the children will always be now. When I heard that a heat stroke happened to a teenager, and I'm like, wow, like this already reiterates what all our youth have been saying at our organization years ago and to today, that this needs to happen yesterday. And if you're thinking about the children, don't think of it for 20 years down the line. Think of them as now, especially when it comes to being part of the community, being part of the community process. Don't be ashamed, and don't be scared to put 19 and 20-year-olds and sometimes 16 and 17-year-olds in this conversation to get those ideas. Appreciate y'all, and congratulations, Chief White Hammond, my state's partner. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Emily.
你哋好啊，唔好意思啊，我啲技術唔夠啊，我頭先就個網絡又唔好啊，出咗去啊，唔好意思啊。你係咪同我翻譯緊啊？喂
We're good to go.
喂，聽唔聽到？我係咪可以繼續講啊？喂？我聽唔到你喺度翻譯。
你好，聽唔聽到啊？
我而家聽到嚇。
OK， 我而家幫你翻譯。
因為個網絡
Emily, I'm very sorry. I had really bad connection, previously, so I got kicked off.
係咪可以講啦？係咪？
你逐句講啊 ，Emily。
哦，好啊。其實咧，我就覺得因為唐人街真係好熱咯。咁有啲朋友咪提過話用水車噴水咁之類啦。咁我就諗。
What I really want to say is that Chinatown is extremely hot. It's designated as one of the heat islands in Boston, and I remember hearing a friend testify earlier that we should install temporary spray pads or sprinkler systems.
咁我想知道其實唐人街嗰啲街燈咧，佢係咪用太陽能嘅電能嚟發電嘅咧？我哋可唔可以利用嗰啲燈柱嗰度加一啲噴霧器嘅？即係喺3米咁上下咧，加啲噴霧器，定時咁樣噴啲冷空氣出嚟，咁咪可以令到個空間會涼啲咯，咁樣。
I'm curious. I was wondering, currently the street lights in Chinatown, are they operated by a solar panel? And would it be possible to install some sort of, cooling system where on the light poles that we can set a timer where in the light pole it could periodically exude cold air onto the street to decrease the searing temperatures that residents experience in Chinatown.
咁樣可唔可行咧？咁，因為我技術上我話唔識咯嚇。咁如果佢用街燈嗰啲太陽能嘅電，咁咪可以環保咯又。
Yeah, I don't know if this is technically feasible. I don't know, but I wonder if we are able to operate on a solar panel for our street lighting. Possibly, implementing this would be something that would be energy efficient.
我想講嘅都係咁多啦。希望嗰啲即係嗰啲專業人員可以喺呢一方面諗下可唔可行咯咁。
Yeah, so basically, this is all I have to say, and I hope the technical experts in this room are able to investigate if this is something that's doable.
Wonderful.
嚇，唔該晒你。
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And per the suggestions from Emily, a lot of them are not going to be addressed in this this ordinance, but the fund that this ordinance sets up can hopefully go to. I'm going to have you mute, Leanne. And so some of the funds from this ordinance could go to the suggestions that have come from both Emily and from David and from other folks as well. That concludes our public testimony. And I wanted to thank, there were several organizations that agreed and disagreed with aspects of this ordinance. And I wanted to thank them for submitting comprehensive written testimony we will be looking at and reviewing. Thank you, NRDC, the Natural Resource Defense Council, and 71 of their members who sent public comments. I want to thank Martin. Again, Martin Roeder did testify, but he also submitted testimony. Carol Wedge, Emmanuel Barros, Climate Law Foundation also submitted written testimony. Carrie Costello of the League of Women Voters, Women Voters of Boston. Dennis Carlberg, I believe, also submitted to testimony. The Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Greater Boston Real Estate Board, as well as NIOP, which stands for, I don't know where they're, sorry, I can't figure out what their acronym stands for, but they're an organization, a Commercial Real Estate Development Association, who all submitted written testimony with expressing concerns, support for aspects of it, as well as suggestions. And again, we'll get into all of that in the 22 some pages of this ordinance and working sessions to come. So I look forward to working with all of you. Andy, you have raised your hand. You've also testified already, so is there something you need to? All right, I don't hear anything. You're on mute. So I am going to allow for the lead sponsor for the first version and the 2.0, my colleague, to close us out.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you to everyone, and Jenny and David, thank you for your kind words about little Margot. It's close to bedtime, but she wanted to join me. And you know, as my time on this body comes to an end in a couple months, I'm feeling, and this goes to Michael Weinstein's point, I don't know if the Germans have a word for hopeful reflection, but it's precisely how I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling hopeful because of the sheer number of young people, college students, high school students who spend time on a nearly 4-hour city council hearing in the middle of the summer to talk about why this issue is important to them, and grateful and reflective on so many of you who have stood shoulder to shoulder with me for the last decade on the gas leaks ordinance, working with Michelle Wu on community choice energy and the wetlands ordinance, the plastic bag ordinance, of course, so many incredible environmental initiatives. And this is the most important. You know, someone once asked me or remarked on this that they hope it's going to be my legacy piece. And I said, well, I hope it's our legacy piece. This is about the people who took the time to testify, to come together, to find that common ground, recognizing the fact that this is absolutely going to be aggressive, but it is absolutely going to be achievable. And we need to do it. We have no other option at this point. So I'm just so delighted to continue the work, working with Dr. Brezius, with Chief White Hammond, with all of my colleagues, particularly you, Madam Chair. We're going to get this done. We're going to have a working session, I hope soon in August, and then I look forward to action after that. So just thank you all for standing with me. It has been remarkable, and I'm really excited. Just the tone and tenor of every panel, of every speaker tonight was just left me with such hopefulness. This is the best hearing I've ever been a part of in 11 years on the City Council. Now we've got to get it done. So thank you all. Have a great evening. And Margot says good night as well.
Good night.
Good night.